obviously, if you have looked, don't have a grade on there, on the pre-company evaluation. But I have 3 pages of random notes from having read at them. I haven't, sort of assimilated all of them, but that's not the intent at this point anyway. But my general sense of where that's at is that, given sort of a difference in presentation style, because it's going to be a hard assignment, given what I've told you, for me to judge in a fairly subjective, which is kind of contradictory to what I'm going to tell you about some of the things that you might want to do. But my sense is that all of them are running 90s and 93s right now. So, I mean, you've done a fairly strong job at stating some narrative cases, and we'll talk about that. But I have some running commentary on that, and I'm hoping that that individuals may be willing to talk some about their own choices of why the companies, and also what their criteria are, and we can chit-chat about that. So that's a piece of tonight. In terms of what I call residuals, well, in a minute I'll quit talking and kind of see where you're at from the last time that we were together. Some of you have been engaging in the dialogue, which I would have to say to all 3 of the groups that I'm pretty tickled with that, although that's sort of a two-edged sword of saying that you're excited about dialogue, because the other side of it is that I have to read them all the time. It means more night hours. But my family says that I should put my computer up sometimes anyway, so I don't know. But this class, of all the MBA classes that I've taught, has been absolutely the most engaged at this point on the dialogue. So, and it doesn't always take 70 or 80 or 90% of you to do that. It may well be that, and I honestly have to tell you, I haven't done a, quote, statistical checking of the number of students. And I'll do that periodically. I'll throw out that stat analysis and say, oh, a third of the class hadn't even got online yet, But it appears that a lot of you are engaged, and so I appreciate that. And if you're not, you should take this opportunity to do so. It really does enliven, enrich sort of the diversity of what's happening out there and what y'all all can offer each other. It's just an amazing thing to watch, and so I'm excited about that, and thank you. And we'll keep that going. So we'll talk about residuals. A couple of, and I don't know that I can say that this is the principal focus, but obviously some people from our professional evaluation groups have sort of made it known to us in a variety of ways that we need to be focused on a couple issues. And last year, Dr. Mueller had asked me if I was doing something specific in these classes about that, and kind of made me feel good at one of the College of Business meetings where somebody asked about that, and he said, well, in Ramey's classes, I thought, well, okay, good. So we will continue to sort of raise that green issue, and whatever that may or may not mean, what profitability is, what sustainability means, and how that plays out, and not necessarily that triple bottom line is that. But do we or do we not have some kind of responsibility to a larger population? Okay, and I don't know where we're at with that. It's certainly a matter of personal choice and how you play that out. Obviously, there are some folks in the College of Business that feel certain ways about that. I mean, as an example, those of you that are profit maximization folks with Milt Friedman and call forth on Adam Smith and the Wealth of Nations and that type of thing may not be cognizant of the fact that if you read some of Adam Smith's earlier works, he philosophically and operationally twisted a whole different way of looking at things. And so it's like not exactly that individual, movement to the top, productivity and profit maximization. And he's got clauses like for the greater good and stuff like that. And so, and then there's another theorist named Amitai Etzioni who's done a lot of stuff on what he calls communitarianism, and again, making money, but doing it in a different context. And so Dr. Clements and I are kind of revisiting the thoughts of maybe writing and even an article about deconstructing Adam Smith. What did he really say? So anybody's interested in that, feel free to jump in. And the other thing that they talked to us about, and I'll throw out some ideas on that and try to get feedback to you, is this whole issue of what human resources is. As a field of study, as a profession, and how this concept of human resource management. An example in one of my undergraduate classes this morning, one of the students talked about human capital. And those of you in the accounting profession may recognize that over the years there's been some concern about the lack of the numerical capacity to count for a human body. Well, it's got so many atoms and so much water and so much of this, and it's worth about 60 cents on your balance statement. So it's like, well, wait a minute. They just produced X amount of income for your company. So how do you measure human capital? And accountants do that, and there's different companies. But it's also sort of it could be a new way of thinking. And so that whole concept of human resource management. So that's a part of some earlier conversations. I have some logistics to talk about and share with you my expectations further. Then, of course, I will throw at you just a few rambling comments from the self-assessments, and you may be willing to share and talk about those, and then also the Maslow article, and then the bulk of my, quote, lecture time will be spent on Maslow, Hertzberg, Gretchen Spreitzer, and then a combined model that comes from Porter and Lawler. And real briefly, and I'll come back to this later, but in the theory of motivation and work motivation, there is a difference between what some people would call content theories of motivation and process theories. And those of you that have been in my classes, we've danced around that territory a little bit. But this article that I assigned you to read doesn't get that deep, but it does give you some words straight from Maslow about the depth of what he's got in the little pyramid. But he goes well beyond that. And when you think about the concept of content of motivation, those 5 pieces are contents of motivational theory. But so what? It's like I can tell you what the 5 are and what they may mean, but I don't know how it works when you put them together and move it around, and some of this happened and that didn't happen. And so at the end of this talk of mine tonight, when we get to that point, this Porter and Lawler model of motivation is what they would call a process. When you take these theories or pieces of it and show you what the linkages are, we start from here where I'm either motivated or not motivated to do something, and how does that work out? As I make this decision to continue, will I or will I not engage in that performance anymore? And you, as future managers, whether we, in my anarchistic sense, don't want to be controlled, but guess what? You're the managers of the future, and it is going to be your responsibility to control behavior to produce results in organizations. It's just how you go about doing that, and so it's important for us to know these concepts of how people are moved to continue to behave. So, and that's kind of where we're at. That's kind of what's happening tonight. Well, I may or may not get to systems theory, but okay. So let me throw a couple of logistical things at you, and then I'll give you some time to respond in questions. One of the, it comes at me in various ways of response from students about frustrations with what I do and don't do. But in one of my undergraduate classes, at the end of a class period a couple of weeks ago, I said, what was confusing about today? And they said, well, it's your bibliography stuff. You throw these names up, and 2 seconds later, you're off on another theory, and we didn't even get the first one. So where did you get that connection and whether the disconnect was? And so I have one of my undergraduate students is actually working on a fairly, a better collated version of bibliographies that I put together over years. And those exist on my desktop in various states of completion right now. So I would just tell you if there's a name that I've thrown at you, or you want to talk about something that you're interested in and you'd like some more, oh, well, where do I go, or what do you think? And not that I'm the resident expert, but feel free to email me or call me, or and I've also got them in various forms, but if you'd be patient maybe a week or two, I might be able to say, and my intent would probably even be to put it under course documents, you know, as a bib that you could look at. I've had a couple of emails about, over the years in this class, because we've got 2 books, and I was thinking, well, why can't I just use one? And is there stuff in one that's absolutely critical and not? And that by the nature of the way that I teach the class, there's some of the things in both that are current and beneficial. And I've had enough students at the master's level over the years that have said, I've kept both books as references. And a lot of times you sell back stuff and I don't want it anymore, and that's your choices. But when the feedback has come that, no, we didn't have to do all of that stuff, there was a limited number of assignments because we have limited amount of time, but students have used that. The second thing that has happened is that as you're perusing, trying to find what a 6 is, you know, when I forgot to put the page number or something like that, you find this other article that said, oh my goodness, that's the one. And so I would encourage you, if that happens, put it back on that discussion board or bring it to class some night and say, well, I think this is important. Let's talk about it. Because that, to me, is the nature of this class. It is the contemporary stuff. It is what's out there. It's what's working, what's not working. And you're the ones that have to make sense of it, because whatever I teach you, if it doesn't connect, right? And if I can't facilitate that process to where when you leave this class, it's all gone, it's all gone. And so there has to be some meaning of what we do here. So the personal exploration is I think, really, really critical. When you do these variations on those writing assignments, and a couple, 3 of you have already emailed me, I've had some conversations on the phone, and I would say, again, that 93 is going to come from, number 1, your capacity to have some presentation that makes me aware that you covered the articles that were assigned, all of them, not just one of them. Even if one was the most critical one to you, well, that's the end of that's your concluding remarks. But I need some evidence that you've read all the stuff. 2, I need some evidence that you listened to what was going on in our interactions. And 3, the third one might be the most critical in terms of graduate level work. And I could offer to you any number of executives out there and studies of their behavior, and every single one of them are always moving outside of the boundaries of what is in front of them. Not just their firm, not just their industry, not just their individual thing, but it's like they're going to read somebody else or they're going to go study another industry. So the third component is your willingness, and some of you have absolutely, I mean, I'm thrilled to death with the papers that I'm reading. Y'all are fantastic. And I get excited when I'm reading these things because, like, I didn't know that, you know, or to hear, have you write back that you actually listened to something that was said by one of your colleagues and dug a little deeper and it said, well, oh, Peter Vale said such and such. That is going beyond. And that's the stuff that's the difference between 90 and 93. And also, the clarity of your presentation. You know, it's like when Trump says something or when Gates says something, it's clearly obvious that they own the territory. And we don't have to worry about that. Nobody has to worry about, or they don't have to worry about whether or not they've broken the frame or not, because they own the territory. And most of us don't own the territory yet. So you have to establish that you can play by the rules first. Synopsis highlights key issue. Or you are just so clear about what you see, and you can present that back to me or anybody else in some kind of cogent, potent way that they say, I got it. I can see that. That's what Warren Bennis talks about, being able to present a compelling vision of what your heart is to other people. You create that playground that other folks want to play on. That's hard work. I mean, if you already own the territory, it's one thing. But if you don't, it's a different thing. So hopefully that helps explain a little bit of that. And you know, part of that also is the things that you think are important. Why are they important? And then what do you want somebody else to do with that? You know, it's like, just learn it. Okay, that's one thing, but what do you want to do with that? You know, so that's another thing. Okay, let me back up, and before we talk about the pre-company evaluations, let me just stop and kind of see where you're at from 2 weeks ago. Any raging, you know, concerns or raging new ideas that you're all going to make us millionaires, and we're going to follow you to do that. You know, comments, questions, thoughts.
Well, comment. I've never participated in anything, discussion electronically like that, except maybe on Facebook or something. But sometimes I'm a better voyeur than I am a participant. But way interesting. I mean, it's very new to me, and it may not be new to most people, but it's just a really intriguing way to disseminate information. I mean, to pass it around like that is just astounding. And there's some of these people in this class are really smart people. And so,
I'm pretty intimidated by some of your comments myself.
That's what I'm saying. I'm like, oh my gosh, what did I get
It's
myself
hard to track,
into?
but it's good. It stretches us.
It was very interesting.
And I like, one of the things that I like about that online, which is different, is there's sort of an anonymity and a protection in there, and you can kind of just jump out there and have at it.
It's true.
You know, and I mean, within reason. There's been quarters where I've had to kind of intervene, you know, and say, time out, you don't need to be attacking each other. But 9 times out of 10, y'all do it. I mean, I'll have students that says, now, wait a minute. You know, you don't need to be so mean to the other people. It was just their opinion. Give them a chance. You can agree or disagree, but support your disagreement. Don't just say they're a jerk, you know. But you do have some anonymity.
And that it can play both ways. I had a problem with blurting out what I thought and not giving it some real thought. And,
Not let it gestate.
yeah, let it mill around a little bit.
I had a colleague one time that told me that she knew that when I was writing after midnight, and she said, just don't do it in public anymore. She said, I get your cynicism, I get your anarchistic tendencies. Just wait. Wait till tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. Wake up, think about it again, be patient, and rewrite it. You know, so it's like, yeah. But sometimes just going off there from the hip is not bad either. You know. Yeah, okay. Other comments about what we're doing, either the process of how we're doing it or what we talked about, the content, you know. I mean, and that's going to rage all over the map by nature of what I think we need to be doing in this class. It's not a finance class. It's not the marketing class. It's the contemporary theories of stuff, you know. You know. Thoughts out there in Hermiston and Clackamas? Yes? Okay. Well, I'm going to keep on raging. Yes, sir.
For smaller companies, how obligated do you think they should be as far as being socially responsible? If they're not really, if their business isn't booming and they're, I guess pretty much their whole deal is profit maximization, how they go about being socially responsible?
Well, let me kind of throw that back into all of you. You know, if you've got a big company that EPA comes in and says it's costing this much money for you to quit toxic dumping, and the little company is trying to compete out there in the market, but it really costs them, you say, okay, you don't have to worry about that for you guys, and you guys do. So it's a question of equity or equitable sort of fair treatment, that if I'm going to hold somebody accountable for this kind of behavior at that level, maybe those people should too. And maybe, yes, certainly the profit maximization may change, but it's a question, you know, do we allow for differentiated meeting of established criteria because of the size of business? Thoughts?
Well, we have different players because we have different restrictions, and different nation states have a different approach to being responsible players out there. And so if you look at some of the American companies that went down to Mexico 15, 20 years ago, they were just dumping waste out and they couldn't get away with that in the continental United States, but they could 200 miles to the south that could do something like that. Large, small, I mean, you start without, I don't know, without government intervention sometimes and care to promote certain types of industry or promote certain types of behavior. Profit maximization seems like the name of the game. I mean, that's...
Well, let me throw the question back at you in a different way, not necessarily talking about size of business, but talking about international. And we think about American law says that you're required to follow this, but let's talk about international law. Where does that establish? You know, who establishes, is there an international court of law that has established a criteria by which we must behave? Or national law in another country, you know, says this. For example, did I the first week talk about a series of one-act plays that my wife watched? My wife and I watched at Ashland one year. Now I can't do this, and I've actually been looking for this online to see if I can find a videographer, you know, videograph of this 3 set of one-act plays, and actually put it, you know, to stream for people to watch. But let me attempt to give you some content of the 3 one-acts, and then I'll bring this back into maybe this discussion. Act 1, we've got an executive, and he's doing this monologue, and he says, well, I just don't know. This profit, yeah, I'm going to make a ton of money if we can pull this off. If I can do it, all right. And it's like, yeah, but, and here, I don't know, but there, it really may work. In the second act, his wife and he are in another hotel, and they're obviously a state of luxury, you know, this hotel where they're at in this other country, and saying, well, we did it, and we really made a ton of money. And the wife is going, yeah, but you jerk, those women are dying and the babies are dying, and it's like, is that a good thing or not? And then the third act, you go on to this, and what you finally realize, it was one of the constant cases in the undergraduate programs of every business division and the Harvard Business Reviews, or the Harvard Business School's case studies of the Nestle case. You know, what are the specific things of social responsibility and legal framework of decisions that we made, you know, and what you would do. And it was this sort of sterile treatment in the schools of business of what is legal and what is not, and what is moral and what is not. And in America, the Food and Drug Administration said, no, you can't do it. The law said you can't do it. But they could do it somewhere else because the laws were different in another country. Which one do we follow? But, you know, as a result of that, women died. Maybe it was just a matter of education. I don't know if the product was bad or what, but babies were dying, and the Nestle's baby food formula stuff was not good. And so in an ethical, moral sense, you think that, well, this is a problem. But it was legal, and they made a ton of money doing it. So now then the question is back at you. Is it okay for Nestle's to do it here, I mean, not do it here or do it there, or is it okay for a small company to do it because their legal constraints are different than the legal constraints of a large company? You know, so who has those rules? And there's cases all over the world in the last 20 years of how, you know, British companies and American companies have incessantly behaved differently in other countries than they behave here. You know, because of the legal technicalities of we can do it there but not here. And so if we can maintain our profit margins by doing it over there, it's all okay. And we have to ask ourselves, is that really right? And actually, that's several of you in your criteria, not all of you, but several of you in your criteria for judging the worth of the companies that you looked at chose to say, we think that measurement, their ability to produce socially responsible products and not hurt folks as they go along the way, is an important measure for you. And it may not be important for somebody else, but several of you feel that way. At least I got that sense from your paper. Is that, I mean, you have to answer the questions yourself, but there is some comment. And help talk to me, folks out there.
I think at what point does a small company become a big company? If you say to a little company that it's okay to produce this amount of waste, the company starts to grow, at what point do you tell them to stop? I mean, I think the practice needs to be put into place from the time that the company is little, so that even though they're only, you know, putting out so many cubic, you know, tons of toxic waste or whatever, and it's really not having a negative impact, where would you draw that line in the sand of, okay, well, now you're this big.
Well, we don't have to worry about it because we're gonna do cap and trade on that. I'm gonna pay you because you do it well and I don't, and I wanna keep what I'm doing, so I'm gonna pay you a little bit of money to get your credits to keep on doing what I do.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a cynical viewpoint.
Yeah.
It was interesting to hear the Oregon State Secretary of State talk about the cap and trade several years ago when he came to EOU and how he thought that was a good thing, that the purpose of that was to eventually drive down the capacity of companies to have the freedom to toxic waste. So we keep on ratcheting down what is a limited thing. In the meantime, I can buy and sell my bad behavior to you because you're behaving good. I'm not so sure that I'm going to say, I've got all my executives going out and doing 10 Habitat for Humanity projects a year, and I'm going to buy some credit so that I can keep on putting toxic dump in the rivers. That seems to me a little odd. I don't know. I asked you last time that we were together if you'd seen the movie Class Action with John Travolta. And it's the lawyer, Jan Schlichtman, basically when he fought Beatrice Foods and General Mills. Here's one for you. Watch the movie. You can go in and Google all that stuff, and Google Jan Schlichtman and Google General Mills at that time, and the deaths that General Mills and Beatrice Foods was creating. But they were doing things legal, so they said. But finally, they came along and were able to prove that. And Jan Schlichtman went through some really changes in his own lawyer and negotiation philosophy about conflict with people to head on. And he said, it's hard to fight people power to power because the minute that I start behaving the way that you behave, we've still got this, I'm just bigger and better and got more money than you, so I win, you lose. And it used to be you win and I lost, but who in the long run wins? And did society gain any benefit? Was there a community that was changed? Did we resolve the issues? No, it's still out there. And so he went through some changes on that. But here's an interesting thing. If you look at Forbes' list of the 100 best companies to work for and Oregon's list and look at all these green companies, General Mills and Beatrice Foods are way up there as some of the most green companies in the world. How do you go from 15 years ago killing people with toxic waste to becoming one of the most green firms? Did they really change? A couple of you in your company, pre-company evaluations actually use the concept of green and greenwashing, in saying, I want that to be, are they doing that? We don't think that's good. So did General Mills and Beatrice Foods greenwash themselves up into the top sustainable companies? That's a question that you got to ask, Other comments from the last 2 weeks, just in general kind of stuff. Again, we're going to shift gears and move on to that motivational stuff as the evening progresses. Let me shift a little bit to you, and we're going to talk about, in a different way, the human resource management stuff. And I'll make a statement that basically, to me, that human resource philosophy is both the science and the art of exploring whether people fit in the companies that they work for. And it's a responsibility of both the employee not to give up and work for just the one that comes along, but keep on searching your passions. Last year, to the students in my class, I shared with them, and I'll share that with you now, somebody that I had not heard of before, that my son shared with me in terms of self-assessment and self-knowledge about what you put on the table. And that's a man named Tom Rath. Has anybody ever heard of the Strengths Finders? I've talked about it in my classes last year, but y'all, it's a new audience. It's a really good one. It's not, the Minnesota Multifaceted Personality Inventory. It's not the CPI from California. And it's certainly not the Myers-Briggs, and I'm not sure that's a bad thing. Go do the Myers-Briggs and have a little touchy-feely workshop on whether you're an IFNPJ or whatever it is that is, and say, how do we interact, and that's okay. But this Tom Rath Strengths Finder, there's a whole real neat kind of digging deep into, and he rank orders what you're good at, And then you get this 15-page printout that says these are the things that you work well with. Why don't you go play with those? And furthermore, here's how you can use those to put yourself into a job position, or if you're already in, here's how it will make that work better for you. Play the strengths. You know, I'm going to ask for a show of hands. It's going to come up here more than there, but last year I told a parable, and I'll maybe try to do it. But how many of you from last year's classes that I was in remember the rabbit run story? Just one. Like, you can take a nap for 2 minutes. You know. So here's this little parable, and you can get it on your own. All that you got to go do is Google "Let the Rabbit Run," and you might find it on Big Dog's leadership stuff, or there's tons of places out there. But out in the forest, they've got this animal kingdom, and they're going to animal kingdom school, and they're doing all these things, and the dean of the animal school is saying, well, I've got a problem because it seems to me we've got some incompetence out there. So I think we're going to have classes to where those fish are going to learn how to fly, and we're going to send, you know, those rabbits to flying school so they can learn how to fly also, and then we're going to send the birds to swimming school so they can learn how to swim, because we need we need to have like job rotation programs and job enlargement programs where everybody can do everything, be good at everything, right? And so this is obviously not working, and there's a few folks that keep on failing all these classes, and it's like the birds are getting wet and drowning, and it's like, well, that's not good. And the rabbits keep on falling out of the trees, you know, and that's not good. And so finally somebody says to the dean, well, who are we going to talk to? So obviously they go talk to the owl, the wise old owl, and said, well, Al, we have this problem where I've got this school of having everybody learn all these things so the forest can be a better place. What should we do? And the owl says, let the rabbit run. And you think about that. What are you good at? And what are your employees good at? And how do we engage in this exploration of what we can bring to the table that makes these companies good? You know, and I'll offer you, again, what I would call a large sort of conceptual fit concept, and then we'll say how that may or may not work, and then say what the real work is to get down deeper than that. And again, old hat for my previous students, but if you take, did I tell you about Republican students and Democratic students and where they work? All right, so if you take a typical left-wing bleeding heart social sciences student and put them to work for health and welfare, life is good. I mean, do you see that that's a major fit? And then if you take a typical right-wing capitalist Republican pig business student and put them to work for Procter & Gamble making $100,000, life is good. There's no question about that. We'll talk about that with Gretchen Spreiter's work in terms of where this fit concept comes and how you empower people. Well, obviously, one is to make that connection. Well, what happens if you take that Republican business student and put them together for work for health and welfare, and we want to give food stamps, and we do what? I earned my money. Why don't you earn your money? Get off. You got it. I don't believe in this stuff. So we've got an immediate conflict in the delivery of products and services by the person who's supposed to deliver it. That doesn't work. You take the typical social science liberal arts students and put them together for health and welfare, for Procter & Gamble, and say, make money, make money, make money. It's, yeah, but do I got to do that again? And it hurts. And I couldn't, it's like I had to say, what about that product? And one of the hard things that I did in my life was I worked for Southwestern Publishing Company when I came back from the Marine Corps selling Bible book products. And the way that worked was you go out into the regions, not the cities. And I was selling these products. Basically, anybody see the movie Deliverance? That was my territory, And it was like, and myself and my partner, we were setting records. You go to the sales school and it's like, there's no way to say no. You know the language to say it, and you know how to get the product in front of people that can't afford it and that don't need it, but they're buying this stuff from you. And one day I actually was selling some Bible story books to a trailer, and the lady just wanted it, and the kid was already reading the book, so it's like, I said, okay, fine, take the book, and I'll come back and get the money later, right? And I'm going back that night, and I don't know that this is really true or not, the way that I remember it, but I'm driving up to the thing, and I think that the trailer is shaking, right? And this lady comes just afraid to death, running out, and her husband is running behind her. And I just got in my car and drove out. I said, I'm going home, But I was making money. And I was making money. And I don't know that that's a good thing or not. For me, obviously, with the values that I was beginning to shape, was not. But other folks continue to sell those products and make a ton of money. I mean, like I said, my buddy and I we were the field leaders for 2 weeks in a row. I could have made serious college money that summer, but I said, you know what, I'm going home. So what do you believe and where do you belong? And how does that work? And a company, should also take that responsibility to keep on looking for the person that is appropriate to that organization. And I offer you not only Rath's work of that exploration of your personal fit, but Warren, goodness, I have a senior moment here, leadership strategies for taking charge, which I talk about frequently. He's got a chapter on self-development where it's the exploration and the determination of the fit between what you are good at and what the company needs, right? And so you match that up. You determine these things that you've got to offer, and you go find somebody that either already wants them or doesn't have them and needs them. You see, and there's an appropriate fit. Yes, ma'am?
This is interesting because I had a real good friend come over from Walla Walla, and we spent the day together Saturday. And she's in a leadership management class that's like 9 months long. And one of the things that she had to do was this test on what her strengths were. Mm-hmm. And she was talking to me about it, and like her strengths were focus. She needed a very structured workplace, and she works for the Corps of Engineers. She was a perfect fit for what she was doing. Yeah. And also, one of the other strengths that she was talking to me about was that she likes to learn.
Now that's kind of she's got some juxtaposition going on.
Well,
there. Many structured environments don't allow that, but so that's
she's a project manager. So what that involves, there's some changing,
right.
There's the contractors, project to project, learning what the order is that she needs to do. And it was a real eye-opener for me because it made a whole lot of sense what she was saying.
I'm going to ask for just a show of hands real quick, but if I say matrix management, how many of you, does that ring a bell with anybody? Yeah, kind of see it. Well, we're not going to jump into that because this class is not really about org theory and org structure, but NASA offered to us these matrix management structures, and instead of having these pyramids or fairly cleanly defined reporting lines, you've got one across and one across. It's like, who is my boss today? And it's a lot revolving around what projects. And that's a whole different way of behaving because the projects tend to generate the passion and the commitment and then move the structure to where it needs to be. So you do have a really loosely structured organization. But given the nature of the people that are in the organization, it is still very structured also. So you've got this real paradox thing going on. So anyway, yeah. Other thoughts on this human resource? The exploration of the fit between what a company does and needs and what the people have to offer that. Is that, just explore that territory. Talking about that a little bit, I will throw out to you one of my pet peeves about the field of human resource management, and that is women who get duped into saying that's my career track, and I would offer you a few words on that and just throw the concept out to you, and then we can let it go or play with it as time goes on. Certainly this thing called the glass stealing, at least in my mind, is still there. Some people would say it's not. Some people would say it's obvious that women are moving up. And then you'd go back in and say, well, if that's the case, let's talk about really why Carly Fiorini is no longer the head of Hewlett-Packard. And you may talk about, well, she didn't have the capacity to manage the things that were happening in the mergers that were going on. Or you can say, well, no, she was just really getting blamed for the incapacity of the people that she took over. And then when she did some good work, they kept on saying this is what happened in the past, and now she's left, and somebody said, well, yeah, but it's because she's not there. But now then the men are getting credit for what she did. Maybe, maybe not. That is just one example. And you can go on and say how come there really is only still less than 5 or 6% of women in truly, truly CEO positions in Fortune 500 companies. Or is the glass ceiling still there or not? Then there's this countervailing theory that if you read about it, it's called the sticky floor. So the glass ceiling is still pushing you up there, but you got this major glue that's holding you in the floor. Now think about this for a woman in the field of human resource management, thinking that this is your entree into the executive track. Now you have to go all over, you know, both in public organizations and private organizations and academic organizations, and think about what personnel officers and this function is. And one of the major functions of human resources is to take care of the clerical stuff that happens. The benefit packages, you know, the hiring process, the EEOC, the affirmative action, the FLSA, you're working with the union people. And not to denigrate that function, but can I hire somebody from a junior college to take care of the benefit package and keep the records? Maybe. And so then you say, yeah, but if I have a business degree with a specialty in human resource management, will I get the supervisor position in the job? Maybe. And then if I took a master's program and furthermore went to University of Idaho that has a whole section on wage and benefit analysis, right? Compensation programs, and that's a whole new thing in and of itself. And so yeah, you do that, and now you've got this master's degree, and you got the job, and you were even called the department head in the field of human resource management, and then the vacancy for VP of HR came up, and guess who got it? The young man who came in to apply for the job after you'd been there for 10 years, that got his degree from someplace else. Very consciously did I say a young man, not a young woman. You know, because that's the one who the good old boys that play golf together are going to make decisions with. Now, that's really cynical. But there's a lot of writing about the glass ceiling and about the sticky floor. So you jumped into that field. Yes, you're right. It's an extremely fast entree into the executive ranks, but you get stuck. And it's very difficult to get out of that because they won't let you into those ranks. And to me, the problem with that in the field of human resource management is the people at the VP level ought to have a one-shot clear reporting line to the president of the organization. So in cases of ombudsman and where you're negotiating and working for the rights of people that are within the chain of command, you don't have the good old boys coming down and saying, you're not going to make a decision that's contraindicated to your supervisor. But if you're reporting to this line, and women are very seldom in those reporting lines directly to CEOs. It's just a cynical point of view, but it's out there and there's a lot of writing about it also. So yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I get a newsletter, electronic newsletter from the CPA, from AICPA, and there's two statistics that came out because of the economy. One of them was that women are still making 80% of what men make in the same position.
And why?
And the other one is that there are more men being laid off and more women are keeping their positions, which is sort of indicative of the fact that, oh, well, she costs us a whole lot less than he does.
Yeah,
So we're
glad
going
you
to
brought
lay
that
him
in.
off.
Right.
So it's interesting.
10 years ago or more, maybe, probably more, when this issue of downsizing really started blasting corporate America, Sears was one of the first companies that jumped in the middle of that. And their top to bottom corporate hierarchy was so deep that everybody knew that they had so many layers of middle management, right? And so they said, oh, it's good to go. And I have some biases about that. Middle managers are who run your organizations. They're the strength, they're the knowledge base, they're the length. And when you start just indiscriminately or discriminately throwing that middle layer out, you're losing a lot of brain talent and a lot of production talent. And Sears did that. And then they turned right around and replaced them with, brand new employees, younger, less educated, to get the numbers back up, but they couldn't contribute to the real work of the organization. And what followed them real quick after that was the American military with some of their downsizing. And they were taking people that had been in the military, 18 and 19 and 17 years and said, you're 3 years to retirement, and saying, bye-bye. And so they saved a ton of money by getting rid of these non-commissioned officers who had time and rank, experience, and knowledge, and because they weren't going to pay the retirement programs. And then they turned right around and jacked the draft up and started bringing in a bunch of 18-year-olds but they got the numbers up, but do they have the knowledge base? Do they have a talent base? And so it's a question that we ask about, what we do with that. Comments, observations, other folks?
I have a comment.
Okay, thank you.
Steve from Hermiston. I'm kind of really interested just listening to this discussion here
Good.
about the sticky floor.
Uh-huh.
I find myself personally in a situation just like this. It's my whole reasoning for taking this program in this graduate courses. Within my company, it seems like it's tough for a person at my job level to obtain a management type position.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just kind of wondering if there's any readings that I can go to and get some kind of tips on how to prepare for applying for management positions and marketing myself, but yet being aware that this sticky floor situation kind of exists, and it's kind of a hard situation to deal with.
Let me respond sort of in my own academic sense, but let me give you a couple of places to explore, and then I'm going to draw a diagram for you. Again, sort of a knowledge thing, and some people say that awareness of the issues and what's around that gives you a little bit more power to deal with on that. You may have to email me directly because I may have to dig for the actual reference on this, but I think you could probably Libris.com this and find it in books out of print to give you some sense of that. But a man named Pfeiffer, and I think it's P-F-E-I-F-F-E-R, P-F-E-I-F-F-E-R. And it certainly is from an academic, theoretical perspective, but the knowledge base that I'm going to offer you in that is something certainly to be aware of. He talks a great deal about power and influence and how for years all of what we're talking about is power down. Not power up and not power through and not power with, and basically any of the controlling influences of these corporate decision makers. Or I think it's not just corporate, it's the public environment, big, little, and everything is still this way. And so how people influence from the top down, and there's a series of articles. And if I know that, it sort of gives me some ammunition to how to deal with it, right? But then there's also in that same book a series of articles about influence up. Oh, is that how they do that? Right? So it's like, that's pretty cool. And then there's one which I think is greatly needed in many big organizations, is the lack of capacity that the middle managers have, because we're holding that middle level accountable. Where do they come from? Where do they get their emotions? Where do they get their skills? Where do they get their networking? And what contribution are they making? And so if I know how people power influence down, how I could power influence up, and how I could play the influence games at a lateral level, it may help me. So that's one, and you can email me. I'll try to dig that one out. And then there's another one. It's out of print right now, but you can probably buy it for about $3 or $4 on Libris.com. It's a guy named Kotter, K-O-T-T-E-R. He's from Harvard, and the book is called Power in Management: How to Understand It, Acquire It, and Use It. And it's just about a half an inch thick, but it is one of the most logical and clear demythifications of this concept of power that I've ever seen. He makes it very logical to talk about the resources that other people have and either the fear of losing those or how they would do that and how you can move in and out of that. An example of that would be a couple of years before I actually did some work with Blue Cross Blue Shield Regents, they actually went through a restructuring project where they went from this top-down management structure into open management. Now, if you were a marketing director for a regional system and you got commissions, and not kickbacks, but commissions and a percentage of the take from everything that was produced in your region and a salary to go along with it, and all of a sudden you hear that you're not the boss anymore, you know, and everybody gets to play equally, you're going to be afraid of that. So the first thing that we can think about is that there's a great fear in the people that are above you, and they're not going to let you play. And it's going to be really difficult if you're not already there to break into that framework. So it's still very, very real on that. So you got Cotter, you got Pfeiffer. I had this mental block a minute ago. Let me see. I don't have any white paper. Here we go. Do not use on the whiteboard, Jerry. I got you. I won't. Okay. Now we're going to come off the cameras, and he's going to put me on, so you're going to watch what I'm drawing right now. And it's going to, not all of what you're saying about what's ahead of you is going to be seen in this, but let me give you, in most organizations, the middle, in terms of department heads, that's what I lost. Thank you. Are you there? Can you hear me now? Okay. In many, many organizations, the real power brokers are not necessarily the CEO, but the next level down, at the top of the middle, right, where people are very, very influential, either in a hierarchical distribution of the organization or a functional distribution within the organization. So we have our basic organizational chart. You with me so far? And that's not going away anytime soon. We can talk about participative management and, you know, networking and neural networking and all that, and it'd be great, you know, the engineering projects. And there, some places it works and some places not, but this is still alive and well. Now let me ask you a question. Where do the people in the middle come from? Anybody? I know we're not online, you know, picture-wise, but I'm listening. So just jump in. Tell me where you think they come from.
It'd be nice to say they come from lower employees that have made an opportunity to move to a middle level management position.
Okay.
So that it would have a knowledge base of
Right.
general workings of the company.
Well, let me affirm that you're at least partially right. And I'm going to draw that on this map, okay, or this picture. Well, not every low-line employee got promoted, right? But, you know, some of these people went up and became. Because they were there 15 years, they were acknowledged, the union gave them seniority, the civil service system, or some way they were able to put themselves up, and they got promoted. But they're still on the dart league on Thursday nights and on the softball team on Saturdays. They're not in the golf league because they can't afford to join the country club. But they're out there socializing with their friends that they did for 15 years. Now you think about this in terms of who they are and what they do. Their whole way of managing the company still is very invested in, we're going to make a bullet, or we're going to pull film at Potlatch and make toilet paper. And we know because we've been out there and we've done it. And it's a healthy thing to do. But how many of you get to do it? So you're partially right. Keep taking that argument further. Where else do you think they come from?
From a different triangle.
Oh, yeah. And where do they go from that? Did they do this? Watch the picture. They come from a different triangle. Did they do this? Or did they do this, maybe? Actually, probably they went and jumped in, right there, So we could take and extrapolate that place to be outsiders. Other triangles, MBA programs, they went to the MPA school someplace else. This city manager up here or this CEO, got his degree from Thunderbird down in Arizona, and they just found another one that did, so we're going to bring this new person in, and we're going to put them right here. So then you've got middle managers. Now that one's the tough one to crack. You know, unless you played there, went there. Back in my undergraduate days, there was this thing in business schools called Alpha Kappa Psi. It was a professional business fraternity. That was the game you wanted to play. Everybody said, no, we're not going to do frats. We're not going to do social organizations. I'm not going to join these undergraduate business clubs. But in that day, if you didn't do it, you didn't get a job. And that networking, that's why I mentioned the school Thunderbird. It's a global school of management. They still call it Thunderbird, but the networking, matter of fact, I was sitting with the student the other day, and I said Thunder because she was saying, where am I going to go to get my master's degree? We talked about this one, and we talked about others, and I just said, well, Thunderbird. So we sat there on my computer and Googled it, and the first hit up there said, #1 networking graduate school in the nation. That's where that stuff comes from. And so I'm not saying that that's what you're dealing with specifically, but the knowledge of where these people are, where they come from, and what I know about me and what I don't know about me, it says, okay, I know that. What do I have to do to get there? Well, you get this degree from EOU, and then you start networking with people that, you know, have these other sets of skills to see, okay, I want to do that. And that's not the answer totally. That's what I lost a few minutes ago. I'm coming off of this, John. Thank you. Go to www.fastcompany.com, www.fastcompany.com, and look in the archives under Stop the Gap. I may have talked about this last time we were together. It's the 20s versus 40s things. It's essentially, it's an age gap, and then there's a series of editorial letters to the editor after the fact. And we can take that a long ways. It's not that clean to say that 20s can't boss 40s and 40s can't boss 20s, you know, but what happens when 20s go across to 20s, what happens when 40s go across to 40s, and you go take another sociology class or buy Sociology for Dummies, you know, and think about ages and stages of different value constructs, because obviously my generation of raging anarchist rebels, you know, at 60, is going to rebel against the stuff that the 75-year-olds do, you know, and it's not exactly like each subsequent generation becomes more and more rebellious because you've got this stuff going on. Each subsequent generation basically is responding to the last one, and so you've got a wave in what happens in that. And so read this stuff on that differences in age, and it may well be that that you're dealing with what people are calling ageism now too. You're not going to break in, it's too late. Now if you'd have tried this at 25 and gone to another couple of classes and broke into that, maybe it'd have been different. And they can say that that's not an issue, but you throw the sex stuff, you throw the gender stuff, you throw the diversity stuff, and it's like, well, they're not going to let the Asians in either, you know, or they will let them, but not you. It gets very convoluted. I don't have the answer for you, but there's a couple of things. Does that help some?
Yes, it does, but it brings another question to mind. After going through all this and seeing that it is tough to break through that, I just kind of left wondering if the proper route to go, you know, like I'm doing, I feel good about myself doing that, but then I also feel like I want to look at who's in those situations, like you said, and try to do what I need to do to get into that position. But do you think it further adds to the disconnect that seems to be out there between managers and regular employees? It seems like a lot of these large corporations, the management barely seems to know what the regular Joe Blow is doing, and it just seems to add to the culture to tear that structure apart, to where they're so high and we're down here, the lowly little peons.
I think it's a I think you have
the management should be all encompassing and try to learn about all this. Like we're starting to learn now, the art of managing is being able to get the interpersonal communication between all levels of employees and build that trust in the organization. And right now with like the Enrons and all these other situations where all you see is the like you said, the country club guys way up there in their offices and going golfing, and everybody else that seems to quote unquote make the money for the company. And there's that disconnect that you feel, and I feel it even within my company to a certain extent. And it'd be nice to be able to feel that we could bring this together and in total give everybody an opportunity to participate in the organization, no matter what level you're at. That always have that ability that there isn't a glass ceiling, there isn't a sticky floor, that there's equal opportunity for everyone in that company. And it makes everybody else successful.
I want to make a couple of comments, but I'd like to get some feedback too on you. I think your comments are extremely intuitive, about your observation that is happening, that management today is really, whether it's the demographic global shifts that are taking, or it's just too easy for them to say, hey, this is hard work, forget it, you're all fired, I'm just going to do this. Or I'm going to take the 4 or 5 people that are already in my network because it's too difficult to make it all work. It is hard work for all of us to work together. So I think you're right, and the reality of the behavior is that it's out there. But then you have sort of, I'm going to throw some more names at you, Warren Bennis in his work, and he talks about trust and building that, but that is the long-term factor. Are we doing that or not? But then you've got the counter-argument. Some of those of you that wrote back in your papers and talked about Peter Vail's work and the fact how fast the rate of change is, and they said, well, that's it. Change is out there, so I'm not going to take any time to take that hard work to build the organization because it's going to bust up anyway. So just go. But here's an example of an organization that did. Back in, I don't know when this was, but the organization Potlatch Forest Industries, it's a wood products kind of folk. Well, over in Idaho, in the north part of Idaho, there's this little town called St. Mary's, right? And they had one of the branch units of Potlatch, and obviously their production level at a smaller unit was not out there, meeting the quotas that were being established by the top. Whether or not their profit margins or their cost of producing was different because it was a small unit, and how do they reconcile that? So PFI said, you're going to be out of there. And the executive that was the area director said, he took a huge risk in spite of, a really strong union, and he's caught between them saying, we're not giving, and a real strong boss that says, you better give. And this guy doesn't know what to do. And he took that hard road that he went to the entire plant. He actually went to the whole community and said, I got a problem. They're going to shut us down. And everybody panics. And he says, what do y'all want to do? And it took a couple of years, but they orchestrated what you said. They got everybody involved. They redesigned jobs. They redesigned the pay structure. And it was a little bit hard for everybody, but not one single person that year. Now, they're not there right now. That's another era. It could be ERROR instead of ERA. But at that point in time, my goodness, what courage it took for that one executive to say, we're going to make a difference, and it's all of us. At some place in my notes, I have that I need to talk about the moral imperative of democratic management. Now, that's a controversial statement because what you're talking about is very much a collective process that every single person was probably needing to be engaged, and the top management was certainly including the totality of the system, as opposed to what is very real and very alive, and that's the singular decision makers at the top, right? So you need to reconcile that back and forth. But this man named Bill Scott, who I've read some of, basically says that democratic management is a moral imperative, not because it has to be democratic management, but because each individual in a system, all the way from top to bottom, needs to be included in decisions about their own lives. And that's the moral imperative about collective decision process. You can't just make a decision that doesn't include people. But you may or may not disagree like that. But anyway, we've got sort of a conversation about what's happening here to an individual, and moving up and down and using what we're learning to make some difference. Part of it is you could say, okay, I'm going to quit the organization and go open up my own or be an independent contractor. Oh, here's another concept for you to look at www.fastcompany.com. Free agency, free agent. And a lot of management said, downsizing is great for everybody. We'll just make everybody free agents. Now you don't have to worry about the company. Yeah, but I just lost my benefits, and I just lost my salary, and I just lost this. But I can go out and find another job really easy, right? But you're a free agent. But go look at www.fastcompany and read the stuff on free agents. And it may well be that it reconciles with you, that it, in a musical sense, the word resonate. It's like, that's good music, I like that, But it may be, well, it's like, oh gosh, that hurts. Play a different chord, would you please? I can't do this by myself. I know about me, people have said, Jerry, you got a couple of these products, you've been doing team building and consulting. Why don't you just quit all the, political hassles of work and just go be a free agent? And I'm going to tell you what, it scares the pea diddle out of me. I think I got 20 people out there that derive my income, and I lose one of them, and how much percentage of my income did I lose? I would much rather have a little less salary, but it's dependable, and I get 12 checks, and I got some benefits out there. Maybe not that freedom that other people like, but for me, it scares me to death. So I don't know about that free agency stuff personally, but some people go out there and they go, great. I had an undergraduate student, and Mark at 23 bought and sold $100,000 businesses on a daily basis. And I says, my gosh, how do you do that, Mark? You just lost a $100,000 business. And he says, don't worry, Jerry, I'll have another one next week. And sure enough, Mark opened up another store, 3 weeks from now. One time, this guy that I'm telling you about, he says, I'm just going to see if all this dress for success works, And he went to a bank in a T-shirt to get another business loan. Now, those of you that play in that territory know that that's not exactly what you're going to do. You better have a business plan. You better be all that. And so needless to say, he didn't get the stuff that was going on. And this is really a true story. Later that afternoon, Mark put on a 3-piece suit, had a business plan in his hand, and he met with the same person. And he got the loan. I thought the guy was just blind that morning or was asleep. But it was an amazing story, but it was because he could play that free agency territory. I don't know. Maybe that's who you are, but explore that. I don't have the answers. Or find another kind of business that needs what you're good at. And so, hey, I have this set of skills. I'm learning a few more. Now I can offer it to company XY instead of the one I'm in, because obviously, where I'm at's not going to work moving this way. So it's time for me to become one of the outsiders moving into another organization. And that, I don't know if this makes any sense to you or not, but I spent 25 years at another school, and I was going nuts, at what was happening to me at the other school. And I said, I'm gonna go postal. So I had the great fortune that they brought me here. So I jumped ship and went to another place and moved into here, not laterally, but at a lower level than I was, but it was a good place to be, because of moving from my skill sets of 25 years into what wasn't working for me there, but did work for me here. So you can do it, but it's hard work. I'm telling you what, I must have sent out, 50 applications in a 2-year period of time. And every one that you get no to, you just cry a little bit more and say, but I better send out another one. I don't have that answer. Other comments, those of you that have experienced some of this. Okay. Let me shift gears for a few minutes. I want to throw things at you from your projects. Now, again, no names, just kind of comments and some highlights. And there's some real similarities across all of you, and there's some real dissimilarities too. I'd like to say a couple of things about process. And again, those of you that are really those type A personalities that if you don't get an A that you're going to go ballistic, and I would say, well, A's and B's are okay. B pluses and A minuses and A's are okay. You get down below that at the graduate level and people start questioning that. So if you're concerned about where we're at in that grade thing, you need to be talking to me, and we needed to be raising that up. And you get down into the C category, and it's almost like a kiss of death in graduate school. It's the same thing as a D someplace else. So be careful, and don't let that get away from you, And so having said that, let me give you some things to think about as you collect information from each other, from the readings that we've got assigned, and from the raging conversations that we have each night. Because what I want you to do is add to what you've already done, refine it, and already I can tell you some of you are really close to not even needing to refine anything. You say, hey, this is cool. It works. It's a legitimate set of criteria by which I'm judging this company. You may not learn anything this quarter, but you may. So when you redo this, here's a couple of things to think about. One is, what's the difference between a narrative presentation of some kind of an evaluative criteria and some kind of bullet-pointed, graphed and tabled, quantifiable, measurable presentation? A lot of you have some great ideas, and it's like, wow, I'd really like to read this stuff, And it's like, but if I'm gonna give you money, or if I'm going to invest in that company because it's a good one, or if I'm going to buy its products, I might be comparing you to another organization that has some fairly clear, quantifiable things that they're putting in front of the consumer base, or the investor base, or the citizens who are being impacted by the work that company does. Right? So look at those of you that are so good at narrative, and I know I say play your strengths. Those of you that write well, and those of you that bullet point well. But this is more of a total presentation, right? And it may well be that if you're not good at quant, and I'm not saying you got to give a statistical analysis of your organization, but just the sort of the graphic numerical presentation of ranking it or something, you need to think about that. And to that end, I will offer you, and you can Google this just as easily as I can. Yes, sir.
So this evaluation that we're putting together, we should be in the mindset of, we're presenting this to somebody else to convince them that this company is or isn't.
Yeah, it's your company, right? I mean, the one that you believe in. Okay. What are you going to do with that, and why? But in our world, in this world of corporate analysis and corporate management, whether it's public or private, I mean, even if it's a service sector economy, you've got a citizenry out there that's paying the tax dollar to keep this thing afloat, and somebody's questioning, excuse me, my taxes are paying for you, and I want you to prove to me why that's a worthy tax contribution. I don't like that. Tell me why that's good. So it does need to be presented to that audience that's going to, either question it or want to keep on doing it. I mean, does that... And what I'm going to offer you, we don't have classes in goal setting and objective measurements like education places do. And it may well be that you've heard this before, but go Google SMART goals. SMART. S-M-A-R-T. And I'm going to talk you through that real quick, but you don't need to take lots of notes because you can Google things and you're a lot more intelligent than I am, so you can take these things and run with them. S is specific. We're going to have a winning season. Well, excuse me? Yeah, well, everybody wants a winning season. But we're going to win 6 out of 7 games. Okay, well, that's a little bit more specific. Then you've got something to play with. Well, how are we going to do that? Who are those 7 competitors? Or who is that competitor that we're selling against product? Is that we're going to have I'll get to this one in a moment when I talk about attainable. But I'm going to mention compact in terms of this goal-setting thing too. So specific, you need to, and just keep on ratcheting it down. And said, well, that's not clear enough. We're going to win 6 out of 7. By what point spread? Oh, but who's got to do what? It's a basketball team. Well, part of that is free throw percentages. We're at 44% now. We better ratchet that up to 66% from the field. So now then you got goals that you're setting that are real specific. It's not just, well, get more free throws, or get more goals, or block more passes, or get, you're going to cut some certain blocks, or you're going to take somebody out. I don't know. And in the business world, we're going to sell so many products. Well, that statistical process control is kind of good for that. And we've got a product line, and we've got 900 products that are usable out of 100 or 1,000. That might not be a Sigma 6 stat. It's like defects per 1,000. Figure out a way to get to that, Be more and more specific each time. Measurable. S, specific. M, measurable. How many of them? It said, well, we're going to get better at what we do. And many of you had some really nice narratives, and it sounds good, but I don't know how to see. I'm a green company. What's that mean? And here's another part of that. All of your criteria, define them and measure them. Define them and measure them. Or get somebody from another area of yours to read your paper and say, is that clear to them? When you say what is a green business, or what is a sustainable business, or what is earnings health, or what is I'm going to measure executive behavior, it's like, well, what do you mean? You just keep on going and going and going and asking more people to give you a response to what you've already said. Define it, define it, define it, define it. And then measure it, measure it. So SMART is successful, specific, measurable, attainable. That's the A, attainable. And my favorite example of that is, does anybody remember the company Compaq? So, I can't remember the name of this other one, but there was the computer, one of the first computers that came out in the portable computers was as big as a sewing machine. And it was like this.
Osborne?
It's what?
Osborne?
No. Well, I remember that one, but there's another name out there. K-Pro. Thank you. We got K-Pro out there. This is a K-Pro sewing machine. Heavy boogers they were. I remember them well because our school bought 20 K-Pros, and we had to carry them up to a business, not a business, but an empty room downtown, because we were having classes downtown, and we had the portable computer lab. 20 K-Pros up and down those hills. And that was a movement into... It was at that time that Compaq was a player in the industry. Now, this is specifically... that's not a good word. This is about this goal called attainable. Now, IBM's a player at that time in this personal computer marketplace, right? You with me so far? Now, Compaq... Now, the story has two parts, but the first part of this story is that Compaq went forward to their entire employee base, setting goals for what their next movement was into the marketplace. And here's what they said. Now, think about what we've already said: specific, measurable, and attainable. Compaq will be the industry leader in the personnel computer industry. Is that attainable? They're playing with IBM. And I'm thinking, yeah, well, I'm demoralized. And you want me to do what and how fast and how far? And I'm supposed to control 55% of the marketplace, right? Because isn't that what the majority or the leading person, because all of us think in those terms. Do you hear how that would impact the morality, not the morality, but the morale, M-O-R-A-L-E? My feelings, my passions. Am I excited about keeping on doing this? Yeah, all right, okay. I can't do it. It's not going to work. Can't play that game. And it kind of faltered on them. And the management came back and said, well, you know what? It's not that bad. We'll tell you what the truth is. Now, some saying, well, what is it? And if it's different than what you've already told me, why didn't you tell me that to begin with? The truth was, and I don't know what the exact numbers are, but it's something like this. IBM owned about 20% of the market, and at the time, Compaq owned about 12. And so now then, I say, I'm going to become the industry leader, and I don't have to move to 55. I just got to move from 12 to 21, and I own the territory. Yeah, right. Okay. What's ease of entry into the marketing? Those of you that remember your marketing classes, is the market volatile? Do they own it? Have they controlled it? Can you get there? It's like you saying, I got to get up into that middle management, but ease of entry up there ain't happening, you know? And it may be the difference between 12 and 20%, but it's so entrenched at the 20%, it's still an unattainable goal. But wouldn't that be much better if I knew that I only had to go 8% instead of 30 or 40? I'm thinking, well, I can do that. I can win one game. I can make 2 more baskets, you know? So you put things in front of people that it's, and I don't know if that's good or bad. In my world of the martial arts, I think we have an extremely unfortunate circumstance that the Western thinking is that they've got to have instant gratification and 49 belts and stripes before they even learn anything. You know, it's like you go there and it's like, here's this white belt, and 2 weeks later you got a stripe on it and said, do you know anything different? No, but they gave me a stripe, man. It's cool, you know, because I can make a fist. And it's like, yeah, right, but you broke your hand when you hit the board, you know, and it's like you didn't learn anything. And the Oriental concept is like, well, that black belt is there because it's dirty, you know, and you just wore it for so long, you know, and I don't know about instant gratification and attainable results. There is this place to where you word things, you put impossible tasks in front of people. Is that good? Is it bad? Maybe. But somehow breaking that down, you know, and contradictorily and paradoxically, the Kaizen process in Japanese management, just-in-time processes, and continuous quality improvement, and then what Tom Peters put on us in the 80s in his first book, In Search of Excellence, was incremental gain. Then I'd offer you, that's another name for you, Tom Peters. But in opposition to that, now here's this thing about goal setting. Specific, yes. Measurable, yes. Attainable, which means that it's very, very incremental. On the other hand, in times of radical change and volatility and chaos, there's a man named Champy, Champy, and this is in my bibliography stuff if anybody wants to play. He talks about radical re-engineering. And he says, don't give up that radical, bam! It's like you were here and all of a sudden it's like, oh! And you can't argue with the successes of some radical movements in the marketplace. Maybe you've got this dream that works. Maybe you don't. But in general, unless you are that risk taker that knows and is willing to play in that territory like Mark was, radical doesn't work most of the time. So again, specific, measurable, attainable. Then we move to the R, realistic. So somebody says, Jerry's going to play one-on-one basketball with Michael Jordan and win. I'm not sure that's quite right. You know, it's like, set the goal, Jerry, it's worked. Jesse Jackson said, if your mind can conceive it, you can achieve it. Yeah, but I'm just not going to play one-on-one with Michael Jordan and win. It's not realistic. You know, I could have dreamed all day long, and I did when I was younger playing football, that I was going to be a quarterback for the Dallas Cowboys. Uh-huh. And you look at this and say, Jerry, you know, get a grip. So I moved from a little bitty town about the size of Elgin into a big town about the size of Portland, tried out in the football team, lasted a couple of weeks, and played tennis the next 4 years. You know, so realistic. And does that mean I gave up my dreams? I don't know, maybe. I mean, what about Spud Webb? You know, I mean, here's a guy that's 5'7" and's got a vertical jump higher than people that, you know, he's got like dynamite in his calves and thighs. I don't know, you know. But that, for him to have a goal to play pro ball was realistic, but not for me. What do you know about yourself? What do you know about that company that you're looking at? Look at them in relation to where they're at out there and see if the goals and the criteria by which you judge them is that criteria specific? Can you measure it? You know, is it attainable? Are they doing those things? Is it realistic? And is it timely? And I'll give you an example of that one. You know, right now, one of the things that we're playing with over in our halls over there with the College of Business faculty is this thing called sustainable business. And it's a really amorphous kind of thing. I don't know what it means. Does it mean that you've just got a profit margin from year to year to year to year? Or does it mean that it's sustainable because you're not sending toxic waste out? Or is it sustainable because we're all going to go out and buy wind towers and quit buying coal fuel? I don't know. We don't know. Yeah, well, if that's the case, and we put together a curriculum that makes the people want to come to our school, guess what? By the time that we've argued about it, it's already out there and somebody else has done it. It's not timely. Now, if we had 7 people out of 10 that had overwhelming passions and overwhelming knowledge bases and connections to the people that were already in that territory and said, we're going to implement a new program within such and such a time framework, have at it. But my sense is that it's totally, totally not timely. Now, that doesn't mean we quit believing in it. It doesn't mean that the individuals who are committed can't do it. You know, Dr. Clements can go talk about stuff in his classes, and I can argue with it in my classes, and unless Dr. Mueller can talk about 7th generation from his Native American background and talk about what's important and what's not and get people to look at that, that's marvelous. But we can't set up a goal to do that, in my mind, because it's not timely. Some people are already playing there better than we are, and by the time that we do it, the field is already gone. So, SMART, specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. And back to define. If you're confused about what you're telling me, I'm going to be confused about it also. You know, comments, questions, observations, just about sort of what you can do to add to those. And then I'll go through some thoughts about your papers, and then we'll take a break. Yes, ma'am.
Do you want us to rewrite our papers?
Not for me. I'm going to be putting some evaluation on that. And right now, what I can tell you, I haven't digested all of them, but I've read all of them. And at this point, unless my head changes between there, everything that I'm looking at is getting 90s and 93s. You know, so it's just what your contentment with that is, and whether you want to argue with me anymore. You know, but from today forward, we talk about how I can make it better. One is the presentation of that. If I couldn't change anything but what's on that paper, could I make it cleaner? Could I make it more measurable? Could I make it more specific? Could I define fuzzy terminology and give me a way to see that I could measure what you want me to measure? And I could determine based on your criteria that that was a good company for whatever reason. I'm going to either give you some money to run that company or invest in it because I want stock money, or I can believe that my tax dollars are being well spent and it's okay, and I'm content with that. And you treat me as that external reviewer. Yes, sir.
Now that we have more parameters for the expectations on these evaluative criteria, can we choose a different company? Or we're sticking with the one that we initially kind of said?
I'd rather you not, but yeah, I mean, it's okay. But what that means is that you got to do another pre-one, right?
Okay.
You'd need to do something else and say, I'm going to take another shot, and then when you turn in your last one to me, right, you'd turn in the new one along with the old one and said, Jerry, this is what I turned in first, but I shifted gears.
Okay.
You know, I'm going to do Corporation XYZ instead of Corporation ABC, and this is why.
Okay.
You know, and then I'm going to give you the end result as a new one. It's a little bit more work for you or not. It may be that you're sort of really committed to that other one, or it's like, well, it wasn't quite so committed, and now then it's like, whoa, he talked about some things, and I see another company that I could look at. So I'm okay with that, but I need to be clear that you shifted gears.
Okay.
Other comments, observations? Let me run a little bit more, and then we'll take a break. Maybe one of the ways for me to do this is just to run through just this like shotgun, Gatling gun, and just throw a bunch of words at you. Then we'll take a break, and we'll come back and talk about that, and you can kind of digest it a little bit. And then I'll get on with some of the night's lectures. Education benefits all. Literacy is a part of the democratic decision process. The impact of organizational results to others. Corporate stewardship, well, why or not? The use and care of resources. But what if the company loses money? Then somebody said, here's a set of criteria that we're going to measure. Honesty, how do you know that? It's like, are they telling the truth? Well, they tell me they're telling the truth, but I don't know. You know, compliance with the laws. I have a note down here later, Sarbanes-Oxley. You know, no conflict of interest. Public disclosure. Actually, if you look at entry into the into the EU, European Union, they have what they call chapters. There's these like chapters of rules and regulations, and if you don't meet these chapters, they're not going to let you in. And it caused some of the later entries into the EU difficulty, and one of those was transparency. Coming out of a communist kind of regime where there was a lot of privacy, nobody knew anything about anybody except the two people that were giving all the money away or controlling things. And they said, we don't want that anymore. Transparency is extremely important, and one of you said that. Compliance procedures, location, economic profit, define that for me. Community service, why? I mean, so we don't do a bunch of Habitat for Humanity projects and send somebody to the kitchens to serve soup on Thanksgiving. Yes, I mean, I think that's great myself, but why is that an important characteristic? You need to tell me. Define that. Why is that important to you, and what difference does it make into a sustainable organization? Mission statements, yes, and how about throwing another piece of that is like the connection of what you see as observable behavior along with what they state as a mission statement. So did I mention Boy Scouts of America last time that we were together? That kind of thing where the Boy Scouts of America publicly declares that they're this kind of an organization, but when they charge their paid executives with getting more and more members of Boy Scouts from families that can't afford to even buy the uniforms, and also they abuse, my thoughts, take great liberties with summer employment laws in terms of abusing what should be a standardized child labor law practices, but hey, it's seasonal employment, so I don't have to worry about it. So there's an integrity thing with what we tell the world and how we treat people inside the organization. So mission statements. Financials, many of you talked about that, and I would say that's okay, but and yes, but get more specific. Don't just say it's 14 financial ratios. Well, are all 14 of them what you're going to measure? Or maybe it's debt to equity or something, and leverageability, and it's like, well, what's that got? Here's an example. Coors was one of the last firms that was holdout for non-leveraged companies, and there was a time when Coors said, we will not expand beyond our internal capacity to grow. We got the money, we'll do it. We don't have the money, we won't do it. And then all of a sudden, the financial world, those folks that are granting stock prices and stuff is saying, no, we don't like your debt to equity. You're not leveraged well. So we want you to borrow somebody else's money to expand to the next plant. And they held out for a long time on that, but then they started doing what everybody did. And they used short-term money to pay for salaries and long-term money to get bigger. And that was a measurement that somebody else was saying was a good one. Are you using all 14 of those financial ratios? So those of you that are talking about financial analysis as a way of measuring, and it's not wrong. It is not. It's not the territory I play in, but that doesn't mean that you can't do there. I'm just telling you, be specific. Define it. Choose those things that you think are relevant financial indicators of the success of an organization, and why. Why is it specific to your organization? Vision statements, profits, growth. How about growth in a declining marketplace? But we've got a success criteria of grow, but out there that industry is declining, and it seems to me that you're going to kill your business for saying you have to grow 10% a year or we declare it not good. So does that mean that we can't grow? But if we plateau out, but how about if the industry's growing and you're declining? Oh, well, how about if the industry's declining but you're growing? Oh, why does that happen? So be careful about your terminology, define it, look at it in relationship to the contextual where you're at. Environmental responsibility, profitability, what does that mean? Somebody started throwing in stuff on intellectual property, and it's not wrong for the type of industry they were talking about, but in terms of results in the products or results in producing an increase in the knowledge base. For example, if you've got patent rights that are part of what your company does, then intellectual property would be something that would be a measurement of, how much does that cost you you know, to get that talent to produce that kind of knowledge base, which is directly relevant to the product you sell, you know, kind of a thing. Let's take a break. It is now, according to my watch, 20 till. How about if we come back about 10 till 8-ish? Okay? I'll keep this plug online or open, and we'll go from there. That's okay, it's a dead issue
Okay.
from my point of view.
Oh, okay.
Pierce may not think so. I don't know if you were involved in our, turn this off. I mean, it's not confidential, but
Yeah, but still.
it's not necessarily that critical that those folks. This is a hard thing to deal with. Okay. My favorite phrase, questions, comments, observations? Yes, sir.
Yeah, concerning the evaluation,
The pre-company evaluation.
yeah, and the
And
post
the
one later, critical in my thinking to this is what is the purpose of the evaluation? I mean, you could have, you could be a consultant hired by management to evaluate something, for investors or whatever. You could be hired by somebody to evaluate a company because they want to buy it.
Yes.
The different purposes.
So the assumptions that you make when you create the evaluation should be fairly clearly stated to me.
Okay, so,
And not
So the-
everybody is going to have to give me this total analysis of all the financials and all of the this and all of the that, because the purpose of your evaluation may be something different.
okay, so the purpose is rather open-ended.
It is, but I
But you
need to know that.
justify- Right. okay.
Because if you just willy-nilly jump off on there and start evaluating something without a clarity of where you're going, it's like, oh, well, I'm thinking, well, I'm missing something here.
Okay.
And it's clearly indicated to me of the diversity of what I've already got in front of me, that there are different purposes that you have. Some of you are evaluating from a financial and economic perspective of how many of this and what the profit margins are. And some of you are moving that in different directions, saying, well, that's important, but this is important also. So you've got it more complicated. And some of you are saying, well, no, this sustainable stuff is really important. And others of you have some that are really management oriented, and so we're assessing the managerial and employee interaction performances of this organization. So that's what, and if you look at, and I get this from a few, not many, but those reports that I've put on there, where that Namibia report is on there, some of y'all have looked at those, and so that's obviously a different way of measuring organizational effectiveness. It's different than somebody that's measuring it simply from 14 financial ratios tell me that the company is going to do this and their stock price will move here. And that's a way of measuring, but not the only way. And I'm asking you that if what you experience this quarter shifts what's in your head about the way that you measure, even if it shifts the purpose. And right now, you may think, I'm looking at an organization from this perspective, but given what we're dealing with, hey, my purpose of looking at a company may even change. But you are dead on target. That none of your evaluations may look the same. But yes. So, given the quick presentation I made of sort of process and method of doing it, and then a few of the comments that I had from reading your papers on the content that's in the evaluations, you have any other thoughts, either questions you want to bring before the group or things that you'd like to share about your own projects and where you're kind of headed with them? Or I can start talking about motivation. John, I assume that when I tell you that I want to go to the PowerPoint, that what I put on here will work? Thank you. He's a miracle. John's great. For a while, we're going to talk about this stuff. Let me back off of that for a minute. John, pull that off again. I'm sorry. I'll go back to that in a minute. I did these self-assessments, and I don't know if any of you were following the dialogues that were going on in the emails about the page numbers, but I was, I think I was sleeping when it was going on. And I had one edition of this book, and another one was up in my thing, and I looked at that and I said, I panicked because I said, oh no, they're looking at page such and such and it's not there. And so I sent an email out, and I was responding to some of the dialogue that was going on and said, you need to go to another page number. And about 30 minutes later, I looked up in my bookshelf and I thought, oh, Gerry, you're an idiot. What was in the syllabus was correct, and some of you may have discovered that. But how that happened is that when I assign these self-assessments, no matter how many times that I've done them, I'll try to do it again and just kind of see, why is it that I want them to look at that anyway? So that's a question that I would throw at you as you reconcile the things that we've talked about tonight and further, and then think about when you want to write a response paper to this evening. I threw two self-assessments at you. One was a masculine feminine one, and one was an individualistic versus a collectivistic kind of a thoughts to see where you think you're at. Now, always, with self-assessments, the first thing you have to ask yourself, is it accurate or not? And you most of us, believe this or not, we accept the authority that's imposed upon us by this document in front. You don't even question it. And I'm sorry, but that was one of the disagreements that I had with some of my psych professors when I was in the psychology and counseling program, that I said, this is not necessarily an expert and a prescriptive authority that I can just say, you take the test and that answer is correct. God forbid that I should ever change being what was there. Or that I may have had a score that's different than what it appears, and I'm not really clear that that's accurate about who I am. You know, so the first thing that you always want to do is check your heart. You know, how fast is it beating? You know, but check your heart and your head against the results that you get and say, you know what, that's not really me. And there's lots of reasons that may be true. Honor yourself and then start playing with that and say, well, okay, I'm different, but maybe that's right. And is there something I'm not quite aware of? Is it something I need to play with or not? So in terms of psychometric properties, there's some reason to think that if people have done it well, they've tested the test against itself and all that kind of stuff, and that if you take it right and don't try to stoke the answers, which you always will, because you know what? The people that are the receiving end, that no matter how many times they tell you, it's confidential, nobody's going to get the scores. You know, did I tell you the last time organization that I worked with, I panicked when I got the email from somebody that had collected the scores, because every name and every location and every individual was on this database of both of the assessments that were out there. And I thought, you can't do this, stop, you know. We can't send that back out. And I think that there was an intent that they gave me the email. They were just going to blanket send it out to the entire workforce, you know. So we didn't do that, and it was good. And so we kept the individual scores, and any of the individuals have a right to that. But what we presented to the organization was the aggregate data. And that's okay, you know, because it's for the purposes of organizational improvement. In here, what it's about is saying, what do you know about yourself, and how does that fit with this curriculum that we're doing out there? And maybe, why is that an important piece of information to know in looking at organizational interaction? And I would contend that both of those are fairly critical pieces of information out there in the raging, changing organization. What is the difference between male and female out there? And gender is still very much an issue. How people behave, what decisions are made, you know, who's doing what, that kind of thing. And I'll share with you my scores, whatever they may or may not mean, accurate or not. And then the other one, the individualistic versus the collective persuasion, you know, that's important because we've got multiple interactions globally with cultures that interact in entirely different ways. And if we don't know how we look at that, which drives our decision process in opposition to another one, right? It's like, oh, that's why I'm having trouble. I'm looking at this way, and everybody that I'm supposed to be making decisions with is looking at it that way. We got an issue, you know? So that's why I chose those two as opposed to others. And there's plenty others out there in the books that you can deal with. So here was my scores. I had a 33 masculine, a 40 feminine, and a 7 split, which according to, if you did these or played with them all, and if you didn't, go do them next week and play with them and see what you come up with. And so what it told me was that I didn't have any particular, quote, sex-type behavior. I'm not a real man. You know, it's like, well, I thought I was, but when I take this scoring test, it's like, Jerry, you quit it. Yeah, it's all over. It'll be all right. Don't worry about it. And it's like, okay. But this androgynous thing, which we just get tons of. And probably about 15 years ago, in the business schools around the world, they were talking about androgyny. It's like, it's too much man stuff going on out there, and we need some woman stuff going on. Oh, and then the women said, no, there's too much, we don't need any touchy-feely. We don't want to sing Kumbaya at 3 o'clock and have a party and hold hands. You know, we need to get the job done. But so then everybody was saying, well, go back and forth. And so and maybe it's because I teach this stuff, and I've been reading about it, and also doing consulting in organizations for a lot of years that have been struggling with how we behave, and looking at the court cases that some of these very organizations have been dealing with. And so I have a tendency, and maybe that's why my test scores show that I'm particularly sensitive to multiple viewpoints, maybe. But that was my scores, and you know, and that's kind of what I try to get students to focus on, and say, look at both sides, think about them, don't give up what you are, but acknowledge that there is another point of view. I don't mean this to be offensive to anybody. It's just my take on a particular group, and what happened with a lady that we brought to speak to us. And Shauna was just unbelievably amazing, you know. And she, when we brought her to speak to our students at Lewis Clark State College, basically everybody was just aghast at the response that we got from her. And this was now let me keep on telling the story, in a school of business, much like this one, where your typical response is a male-dominant Republican capitalist student, right? And even with the women, where there's even stronger and stronger rise of women in that student body, and also in the corporate world, but they're still not at the top, you would tend to think that feelings and emotions and behaviors would start shifting, but not quite. This lady named Shauna Adix. Now, again, if you live in the Northwest, then and don't have an awareness of the LDS Church, then you're not paying attention to what's going on, because it's a part of who we are. Now, whether you like or don't like that, you know, and tolerance of everybody's position, and these are just some observations that I have, right? It's just so stupid for me to say some of my best friends are, you know, but I'd like to think that I'm not understanding, but I'm not LDS. So how can I ever think that I would understand that population of people, right? But if you do, and you've studied this issue, you do know that it is predominantly a male-governed organization. Their beliefs, their philosophies, how they look at the world, and how they behave. And there is just one ton of integrity about that organization, because what they say is what they do. And you have to honor that. I mean, that's a great thing. I mean, well, to a certain extent, I wouldn't honor Charles Manson for doing what he says he does. You know, but in that group, I would be okay with that. Now, Shauna, well, wait a minute. I just started talking about a woman a minute ago, right? Shauna Adix was this lady's name. Now, let's go down to the Mecca of this territory, which was BYU, Brigham Young University. So now we're getting more and more entrenched to headquarters, right? Whatever headquarters may be. Wherever, I could start telling you similar stories about IBM, but we're just simply talking about a church. So I'm not trying to get into this religion and values of doctrine and dogma for you. I just am trying to state the case that there is a group, an organization, and it behaves in a certain way. And the closer you get to the central group of people to that, the more powerful that behavior becomes. Does that make sense? Okay. And we look at our own organizations. How do organizations evolve? They revolve around the passions and the actions of the people that started them. You know? Gates and Job started playing in the garage together, doing some stuff, and all of a sudden, you know, you've got major organizations that behave the way that they started out. The LDS Church is a male-dominant organization. I just shared with you a lady, and then I threw in another piece of the thing there, BYU, right? Shauna Adix started a women's resource center at Brigham Young University back in the day when there wasn't any such thing. And we don't even talk to women, because they belong over there. Or they in the friendship circle. There's something. The women have this other thing that they do, But it's like, whoa. And we brought her to talk to our students about the concept of the use of power in organizations, because that's pretty potent. What she was able to pull off and get response and make a major change in the access that the women in that organization had under her care and tutelage was just phenomenal. So it was a pretty intriguing thing. So this concept of why do we need to know about whether or not you're dominantly male or dominantly female? And that was about the time, back to what I was talking about, my own scores, that business schools started pushing this thing that, well, maybe Sean is a little bit too extreme. And maybe somebody else, on the other hand, is too extreme, but we've got this multiple thing happening in organizations, so that concept of androgyny. Then there's individual versus collectivism. I was a 3.5, which I certainly felt like it would happen. And maybe in my own mind, I already answered the questions before I started answering them, that I thought that I just play this territory in the middle of autocratic versus democratic decision processes. I'm not really individualistic because, I back off and think there's sometimes that you really are supposed to be collective. I'm not really collective because I think sometimes you're supposed to tell people what to do. So my personal scores are in the middle, but it's not where typical business students come out. Typical business students tend to be over on that individualistic kind of stuff. I got a pop out there. Is that me, John?
I'm not sure where that's coming from.
I think somebody's telling me I need to. Shut up, Jerry. It's time for you to stop talking. I don't know. Comments, questions, observations. They're important things to know. The world is changing. Both of those are very real. Is it this?
Might be.
Am I hitting something?
Give it some strain relief. Let's see if that helps.
I'm going to wave the magic wand at people. Comments, questions, observations. If you haven't taken them, go take them. See where you come up. Ask yourself the question, what difference does that information make when you look at organizations? Yes, sir.
I've always been so leery of this kind of stuff.
Mhm.
And I question it. I can see taking multiple tests from different, to get a different perspective or a melding together of different.
Or take it in longitudinally different times.
That's my point.
About different responses that you may have. I'm going to take this test with regard to the way that I interact with this company. I'm going to take this test the way that I interact with my family. I'm going to take this test with, and it's like, okay, now I got 6 Gerrys that you to think about,
When I was 20 versus 30 or 40 or 50, it was always, there's a change, and the dynamics of who we are just that.
It's like my kids telling me that hippie and the Marine kind of a thing at the same time, and I know that. When I look at the world from these eyes, I think this way. Does that mean I'm wishy-washy, that you can't deal with me because I don't know what I'm dealing with? But Fred Fiedler, Mary Parker Follett, 100 years ago, 100 years ago, Mary Parker Follett started telling us the situations that you deal with in organizations will make an impact on what you need to do. Pay attention. So, yeah, you do have multiple eyes. And sort of, I don't know if that makes us not. One year I asked a question of students, what's the difference between standing on conviction and a value and being tolerant of a diverse way of looking at the world? And so the folks on one side would say, this is it, I can't change. And the other people saying, yeah, but look at how many people you just cut out of your life. And you can't interact with people on the other side of the world because you're not willing to do that. But it's a struggle to move from, this is clear to me, and I'm not saying when you're clear about that you should be able to change, but there are multiple viewpoints. Yeah. Maslow. So I'm going to ask for a show of hands, and I would hope that something shifts a little bit, but how many of you have been exposed to Maslow's work someplace, sometime in your college career? You know, everybody. Now, I can see some faces out there that have had my little twist on Maslow, you know, which I'm going to, you know, hopefully get through a little bit tonight, you know. But he wrote some things beyond what most of the textbooks have been willing to give you, the pyramid. He then twisted that, and he offered not 5 things, but he offered 3 more. He moved his concepts of motivation from basically it's food and water and a safe working place to something a lot more esoteric and individualized that dealt with what he called the being concepts of motivation. He, at some point, I don't know if this tweaks your interest in terms of papers or not, or things to write about and projects to engage in, but I don't have the quotes on this or the resource bibliography notations, but several years ago I had some students that had, quote, discovered that Maslow and a man named Fred Hertzberg had actually worked together on work motivation theory. And it really makes sense when you look at what their later work is, which I'll try to share with you a little bit as the evening progresses, when they talk about individualized motivational processes and concepts as opposed to collective. What I can do for the group versus what I can do for you individually, and those are entirely different. You know, so we'll move this. But let me throw a few questions at you that may sort of get your ideas moving on that. John, I'm coming back to the yeah. I said I was. Yeah, there we go. Perceptions cause behavior that creates reality. Now, we can get real new agey about this and, you know, talk about Jesse Jackson stuff. If your mind can conceive it, you can achieve it. And go back to the 60s and talk about the human potential movement, Silva mind control. We can realize that the Soviet Union was well ahead of the game in terms of the human potential movement. America followed suit and began to do a lot of experimentation with high-performance soldiers. We get real radical about that and go watch a movie called Men Who Stare with Goats. I've got some other stories about that. Anybody seen that movie? Yeah, if you want to get really bizarre here, the guy who is Jeff Bridges, right? I know him, I met him, and in my office I have a picture that he drew of something that I did at a conference where I was at. But they're not the same characters. It's a movie, and the Jeff Bridges character is really radical, and Jim Channon is not quite so that way. He is an absolutely brilliant management consultant. But the stories that are in that movie were true about the human potential development of soldiers. And some of that stuff was actually happening, and it's just an amazing thing. And that statement, it says that what's here, and you can tell me that you don't like what's here in me, and it doesn't make any difference because you're not looking at that, but what's here and here is going to change my behavior for tomorrow. You've got a manager that comes in you at 5 o'clock and just blasts you out of the water, and it's like, oh my gosh, and you slept on all that night long. Your perceptions of what happened, you don't think that's going to drive your behavior tomorrow? And so your behavior at 8 o'clock is going to be more tendent to drive your next behavior unless you can break out of that. It's an amazing thing, but your mind is extremely powerful in terms of creating, you know, your next behaviors. So we need to think about that in the motivational stuff. The classical theories of motivation that the business schools teach basically are make them happy, they'll work for you. Now, how many of you from any classes that you've had remember the Hawthorne studies or the lighting studies? You know, there's some hands going up out there. And what they did was it's like, turn the lights up, turn the lights down. They're going to work more the sewing machine stuff that's going on. You know, oh yeah, okay, that's right. And then what they found out was that it was less to do with that and more that the supervisors were coming saying, how you guys doing today? You know, the attention that was being paid was creating the satisfaction. I'm happy because you care about me, right? And so they kept on working. made them happy through the attention, and they kept on working. And no matter what they did, you know, their production was going up. Not anything to do with better or worse lighting, but happy employees because somebody cared. That's the classical school of motivational theory. Give them the food, take care of them a little bit, they'll work for you. Then we moved into the more current thinking about motivational stuff, and I would offer to you the Microsoft concept. These folks have more money. It's one of our students from my previous school went over to the West Coast, and he became an Edward D. Jones kind of a guy, and money consultant. And he says, Gerry, these people are silly rich over here. And he was talking about the secretaries that worked for Microsoft, had more money than the average employees anywhere else. And when these folks were getting $50,000 bonuses for production at the end of the year, you're saying, what is it? It's because they had work, productivity and performance, right? They had work that they loved. Wouldn't that be magical, for you to have this job that's so into how you are that it doesn't make any difference about the other stuff because you're happy anyway. Now we got this chicken and the egg thing going on. I work, therefore I'm happy because my work is special to me. Or I'm happy and I'll keep working. So now then, and I don't know which one comes first, but there is a difference in that. Now I'm going to shoot down a couple of lines here because those two are, they're kind of controversial, but that's okay. But look at these last two. Both of them are true statements. And it's going to shift our thinking about motivational theory and motivational practice. How I move people. Now you have to reconcile yourself to question as a future manager, can you motivate? Can you move people to behave in ways? Or am I just sort of a conduit? Can I set conditions for people to motivate themselves? And I would contend that, hey, if you're in this conduit place, you're still driving behavior. So you can never absolve yourselves of the responsibility that you have for changing behavior. You're a future manager. But how do you do that? And so one way is that I know this one, that which you do not have will move you. And we're going to talk about food and water. I don't have food and water, and I have the capacity to write your paycheck with which you will get food and water. So therefore, you don't have it. I've got the capacity for you to get it through what I can give you. Therefore, we can exchange this, and I can get compliant behavior because of what you don't have that you will go after. You will go after food and water because you will want to survive. Does that make some sense? We'll elaborate upon that. I'm not going to go into the early psychological theories that set the evolution of this and how it moves that way, but I'm going to go to Maslow in a minute. Now, a shift to the other side of that which you do have. But what do I mean? Well, I've got food, so I'm continue to be motivated by food? No. What happens when you get food and your stomach was rumbling? It quits rumbling because it reduces the tension, it reduces the search behavior, it reduces the physiological things that are happening, and it stops. That which you do not have motivated you until you got it, and that's over. That is the premises of the way that Maslow designed his work. Something else is going to kick in then, right? And then at some point, we make an internal shift, and we won't move towards something until we've got something of it. One of my previous students called that the glimmer theory. You know people in your life that got this little twinkle in their eye? And you think, what is it? They're happy and excited, and the character that I started using last year is an example of that. And I never met him, obviously, because he's dead now. But go read the Pat Tillman story. Read Krakauer's book on Pat Tillman, and read his mom's book, When the Boots Hit the Ground. It's got sad stuff in it because it was a friendly death by American fire, and it's really, really just emotionally disturbing to me because of what I saw in Vietnam and that. But the other part of it, the passion and the excitement and whatever that guy had, it must have been a twinkle in his eye because people followed him. And the story that's told you know, and it's told many times. I mean, he went to his high school coaches, they were the baseball coaches, and said, I want to play baseball. And they looked at him and said, yeah, right, you're too small. And he looked back at him and said, okay, I'm going to play football. They laughed at him, and now then the stories tell. You follow the Pat Tillman story and see where he went. You know, where was the passion? Where was the twinkle in his eye? And why did people follow him? That which he had just a little bit of. He said, I've got it right here, and I'm going to go. I'm motivated to do more and more of that. And guess what, folks? Let's all go play together. You know, what I don't have, food and water and a safe working condition, if I don't have that, I will go get it. On the other hand, if somebody somewhere can just help me find that little twinkle of what's out there in front of me, you bet I'm going to go after that with a vengeance. And that's hard work. But isn't that the dreams of what we want to do with our employees, with our organizations, and even as self-managers? Do I want that same dream for myself? So that's where we want to go with this stuff. Okay, I don't want to do that. I'm going to jump forward. This is early theory. I don't want to do Fred Luthon stuff. Actually, if you want this PowerPoint, somebody email me, holler, and I'll either give it to you or I'll transfer it over to your course documents. It's in another course right now, but you're welcome to it. I'll get there. Honest, I will. Bunch of motivational stuff, bunch of theory, right? All right, that's your basic model. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time there. I mean, I hope that if you haven't got that, go find it. Go to Google and look up Maslow for Dummies or Maslow for graduate students or something. You know, but this is the basic concept, and it's out there. But we need to kind of move beyond that. And I would tell you that if we look at this, those of you who are looking at it now, the bottom three levels of I need food and water, I need a roof over my head and safe working conditions, and I need the group to belong to. It's fairly accepted psychological theory that those are basic survival things. And that causes Americans, the third one causes Americans some difficulty because that group phenomena, you know, we don't like. We like individual phenomena, but it's still basic psychological theory that it's more successful for a group to protect itself than it is one person. So whether you claim individualistic stuff or not, that it's easier for 15 baboons to go find enough bananas on 2 acres to eat than it is for one of them to find that. So there is protection in that, and it's a survival kind of thing. Then we move to the more human kind of things, and we're moving beyond that. Now, this is what I offered my undergraduate students, was that it gives me some perspective on different ways to look at that hierarchical thing that says different people look at it different ways. On your left side of this model, you see Maslow's pyramids, and I would say for many, many others, this is another guy named Chuck Alderford, but the theory is almost identical. He just said there's 3 things instead of 5. But the lower one demonstrates graphically, and for the lack of a better groups to say how this works, I'm going to call that lower socioeconomic folks. Where do they spend their time? You know, they're multiple income families because it takes 4 jobs. I just talked to one of my alumni friends last night, and you know, he and his wife, and this is an elementary school teacher in California to show you how he's not exactly at the middle. He doesn't think, but he probably is. But their house got, you know, upside down mortgage, and now both of them, he and his wife, are working. There's 4 sets of incomes going into an elementary school teacher in California. That's really sad, you know. But the point being is that most of their effort is spent in getting food and water and a house to live in. And the things of other importance in their life tend to not be as important. And Craig was sharing with me some things that had happened in his life, that this other stuff of, you know, dreams and actualization and content kind of got lost sight of for a few years because he had to focus on these extra jobs. He's working in a grocery store at night, you know, and because that effort, you think about lower socioeconomic people, they don't spend time. And so if you've got an employee like that in your organization and you say, what's your dreams? Where do you want to go? Can we make fish in the desert? Well, no, you can't. But I need a job, you know. So you're trying to motivate in a different way, and they're in an entirely different place in their life. Let's look at the middle. The geographical space for a middle income person is that they're in that group stuff. They got food, they got a union job, but they certainly still can't afford the, country club membership, and they're not dreaming about saving the world and the planet. And I'm going to give you a paradox to that in a moment. But for the most part, the middle class folks in the world put food on their table and they go play with their friends because that's what works, right? That's what they're motivated to do. So you definitely don't want to give up the company softball team, for that group of people. And you definitely don't want to give up any kind of group social activities that seem to help. That Friday afternoon 12 o'clock pizza party that you think you can't afford to do anymore, you better rethink that one, because that's what grabs them all together. They're able to continue doing what they do because of that. Then on the other hand, the rich folk are going out there and saving the planet. Now we can get mad at Gates all day long and say, yeah, well, the money that he gives away is about like a nickel to you and me, But the point is, he's doing it. The man has invested so much money in education and rights to the AIDS people in Africa, and it's just amazing how he has these dreams of helping folks. And you may not like that and say, oh, it's no thing, but it's important to him, obviously. And the altruists that are rich spend lots of money and time and dreams and hopes changing the planet. And I don't know where you're at with that, but you need to think about it. Now, what I would contend is that our hearts are really powerful along with our minds, and many of us, when you use this as the only criteria by judging how you're motivated to keep moving and getting out of bed in the morning, it's some of that top stuff at the top that's happening to us anyway, and I offer to you James McGregor Burns' book on leadership. He's a political science historian that studied the Kennedys and Gandhi and Hitler and many other people. And surprisingly, many of the people that we look at as being results producers in this global arena basically came from the middle class. And you think, well, Kennedy wasn't middle class. Yeah, but he wasn't old money. He was new money, and that's an entirely different thing. And so why was he doing what he did? Gandhi was middle class. Jesus was middle class. And these were people that somehow, moved outside of that. It's only my group that motivates me. It's my dreams of making some difference. That actualization that Maslow talks about. It's just a different way of kind of getting perspective on where those processes come from. Now, this is where Maslow's work starts to shift. And if you look at the 8 viewpoints rather than 5, and he divided it up into 2 lines, right? One was these things that are the basic, what I don't have. I don't have food, it's a physical thing. I don't have a roof over my head, it's a safety thing. I don't have the group to play with, and that makes life more difficult, and that's what I don't have. And I don't have a pat on the back, and how that converts is that if you don't have the pat on the back, you don't have the confidence to keep on reaching out to develop the competence to get the bananas, or to get that, oh, I'm really good at filing things and I understand that file system, or I'm really good at programming, but if I don't have esteem and a pat on the back, I'm going to write a bad program. How many times have you ever been in a situation where somebody keeps on it's like ducks quacking at your heels, and watch your work start driving down because you're not as good at it, because you keep on thinking about those ducks quacking at your heel? And if the ducks that are quacking on the heel would pat you on the back every once in a while, it's like, all right. The next day, you have less.
Excuse me?
Yes?
can you put that PowerPoint back up? Because we didn't get it all written down. Thank you.
Okay, is it up? Got it. Okay, so I'm at number 4. Actually, if you want this PPT, email me and I'll put it under. Matter of fact, you know what? I'm just going to do it. I will put this under course documents. You don't have to email me. It's like that. Get over it, Jerry. It'll be under course documents tomorrow. Thank you. Don't worry about taking notes. Take a deep breath. Just sit back and listen to what's going on. Think about if it makes sense to you or not. So that's the things we don't have, right? And if you don't have them, I can motivate you. Now, in a Skinnerian sense of behavior modification, if I know that about you and I have that in my back pocket, if I'm the one that has the paycheck, if I can set the conditions for your work, if I can pat you on the back, if I can give you a team to play with, and I know that and it's in my resource pocket and I know that it's missing, I can drive compliant behavior based on the exchange of that relationship. Now, at what point will your behavior stop? When you remove me from the situation, when the stimulus, right? If I'm the stimulus point that has access to that, if I get out of that relationship, you may revert to old behavior. But as long as I'm in the relationship and can exchange that which you do not have that will motivate you, right? It works. And that works for 90% of the people because most of you have exactly the same needs. Now, you may not, filet mignon drives me a little bit more than tofu, and peanut butter. But a peanut butter and jelly sandwich will give me just as much sustenance as the filet mignon. But, oh my goodness, when I can grill that filet mignon and pull it off and put a little garlic and salt on, that's good stuff, So, all right, now let's shift over to this other one, which is more difficult. Now, that's that which you do have, right? And that's a little bit, this gets up into other leadership factors and leadership theory and motivational theory, one of which would be the trait theory, which is kind of driven by the question of, are you born with it or are you not? Did you develop it environmentally because of the things around you? Did Pat Tillman, was he born with a twinkle in his eye? At what point did it happen? Was it because he was nurtured in an environment that he had a little bit of cognitive awareness and mental stimulation, and he lived in a family that liked to play these mental cognitive games of being excited and learning more and learning more and learning more? Was it his environment or was he born that way? I don't know. Doesn't make any difference. He had a little bit of it. He had this sense of symmetry and beauty and truth that made sense to him. And this is really convoluted, and you need to read those books in order to understand that, because his sense of truth and what that meant to him was very complicated as you move through the story of Pat Tillman giving up a several $million-dollar contract to join the military because he felt that was what he needed to do. That's incredibly emotional, and then to find out what happened to him as a result of that and what other people said was what his truth was versus what he felt like it was, right? But he had a sense of his value that he was living with. And if you've got that, it's easy to keep. Well, no, it's not. It's kind of hard territory, especially when your truth is different than somebody else's. It's hard territory to play in. I'm going to jump ahead to number 8, the metaphysical, and then I'm going to come back to the actualization. Bigger than physical. Now, that's what I would call the God thing. In America, that's fairly easy to understand. We have a sense of what that may or may not be. But around the world, it's not quite so easy. It might be the nirvana thing, or it might be the Buddha thing, or it might be, the emptiness thing. I don't know what that may mean. How many of you know the name Madalyn Murray O'Hair? I see a couple of hands out there. Madalyn Murray O'Hair is to atheism as Billy Graham is to God. Now, if I make that analogy, can you see that there's some conflict going on here? And if you say Billy Graham and say God, you understand there's a relationship that Billy Graham's life is lived by the principles that he has inside of him. It drives his behavior. Now, you can agree that that's a good thing or bad thing. I'm not here to judge that. But it's a marvelous thing for the people around him. It's wonderful. Now, the God thing to Billy Graham is the same thing as atheism is to this lady named Madalyn Murray O'Hair. She's dead now. But she was a proclaimed atheist, agnostic, whatever, however you want to look at it. She had disciples. She had a newsletter. She had a following. And so from this sense, in terms of psychologically determining what is driving her behavior, she was absolutely driven by her commitment to atheism, not God. You know, but it's something bigger than physical. Does that make sense? Can you understand how that drives? You have to know what's driving people's behavior. What are the causes? What are the values? What's deep inside them that they have a connection to? And you can believe it or not. You can agree with it or not, but it does drive people's behavior. Those deep sense of values is what Maslow is calling that metaphysical concept. Is that, I mean, I'm not saying you have to agree with it, but can you see the clarity how that would drive a person's behavior? Okay, so that's kind of where we're at. Let me back up to do the metaphysical thing too. I got to look at this one slide next. Nope, I don't want that one. I'm going to throw my twist out on actualization. Now, those of you that have studied Maslow's work, he has this concept called self-actualization, which again, now we look at where we started the self-assessment process tonight on individualistic kind of looks at the world versus collectivistic looks at the world. Now, if you read more and more of Maslow's theory of motivation, and even the article that I assigned tonight, there's sort of a deeper sense of movement towards thinking that my inside, my personal contentment with the world is what will drive my behavior. And that's not totally wrong, right? But in the world that we live in, that we are preparing ourselves, this is not Pepperdine, folks. And if you think that you're in the school for entrepreneurs, then you probably need to drop out and go someplace else. But there are schools that prepare you for individual, totally by yourself creation of businesses. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but we don't do much of that because 90% of the world that we're sending you out to and that you already are part of is what? It's a group. It's a collective. Now, we struggle with that in America. And I give you Honda and Volvo and their entree into when the corporate entities of Honda and Volvo first moved into America and had a lot of difficulty because it didn't work. Their collectivism didn't play out. And I'm not here to preach communism, and I'm not that kind of, it's not a class in political science. It is a class in business behavior and what's working and what's not. And I would contend that group kind of effectiveness does create group performance. And so if we look at this concept of being content, being happy, I would say to you that it works better when we get to this a concept that I will call mutual reciprocity. Okay? Now, and if you want to dig into that a little bit differently or ask, that one is, I'd have to go find it. It's available also, but Dr. Carpenter and I presented a paper at a conference where that phrase is actually mentioned called mutual reciprocity, and I'll try to get you there shortly. And I have to tell my daughter's story about that, so beg you guys that have heard it before, take a little nap for a few minutes. My daughter is 8 years old. Not really, she's 30-something now, but when she was 8, she dreamed of herself as Pele. And those of you that play in that world know who that character is, and if you don't, he was a great soccer player, right? And Jenny's 8, and she's thinking, this is my dream. Now, part of this self-actualization stuff, I perceive, listen carefully, I perceive of me behaving in reality. I'm going to do this. So part of this concept of self-actualization is this perception of me into a real behavior that works. And then you're content. Does that make sense? Okay? I'm going to come off of this, John, because I'm just going to talk through the Jenny story a bit. Thank you. And you can get this on PPT. So Jenny is 8 years old, and she thinks of herself, Jesse Jackson said, if your mind can conceive it, you can achieve it. And Jenny's thinking, Pele, Pele. So mom and dad take her to the Boys and Girls Club. We buy the little outfit and all that kind of stuff. And 30 minutes later, she's in tears and wants to quit. Now, being the mean parents that we were, we made her finish the season. And I don't know if that was just sheer stupidity or we're trying to teach our child tenacity and don't quit. Life changes anyway. We made her finish, and it was brutal. It was terrible. But I got to tell you what's happened like 30-some-odd years later, almost 30 years later. And it was like, it almost made me cry because her blogging to her friends, she just ran her first marathon. And so here's a young lady that couldn't play soccer at 8. And she Googled that, and she said, I got to tell you, at 8, I couldn't barely walk a mile. And even 3 years ago when I started, it was a struggle. And I want to tell you, I just finished a marathon. So it's like, whoa, that's a shift. But let me tell you the rest of the story. It's like Paul Harvey says. At 8, she thought she was going to be Pele, and she tried that, and her perception of reality didn't work. So Maslow can talk to us all day long about self-actualization, but if I say, and Jerry's going to be quarterback for the Cowboys, right? Jump out there, Jerry, just put it on. It's like, nope, 2 weeks later, you're not on the football field. You know, when you weigh 85 pounds in the 9th grade, that ought to tell you something, you know. My perception of myself into that didn't work either. But at the same year, Lewiston Civic Theater, put on the play Annie. 50 young women tried out for 8 parts. They ended up with 10, and my daughter was Molly. The brat, the lowest, youngest orphan. And since that time, I got to tell you, she was in every play that allowed for a part of her age in the Civic Theater. She was in plays at Lewiston High School. As a senior, she directed the pit crew, the orchestra, for one of their productions. She went on to Whitworth to get a degree in flute performance and piano pedagogy. She then went on to take a year of school at the master's level. She came back to Lewiston, and she's still a stay-at-home mom right now, but in Lewiston, she became the church organist for the Methodist Church there. And when her husband got a job teaching in Coeur d'Alene, I tell the story, basically that building cried when she left. The building suffered tears. And that church just went up in arms and said, this woman made our life different. I perceive of myself as an artist. I perceive of myself as a musician. I perceive of myself as this. And at 8, she tried it out, and all the board that said, you know what, you're pretty cool. And she plays in the Coeur d'Alene Symphony right now. One of her friends, this is kind of a bizarre kind of a twist that happened last year. One of her friends said, well, Jenny, they were at that beach thing with Silver Lake or Silver, whatever it is. And my daughter's not a terribly huge person. She's pretty slender and in a bathing suit. She's not Miss America or anything like that, but she's a healthy person. And this other said, can we talk to you a little bit? And this lady went up to her and said, look, I really don't want to offend you, but you're not really you're pretty skinny, right? And Jenny says, yeah. And she said, well, would you be willing to come try out for a role in these advertising and medical journal films? And Jenny said, well, sure. And she goes in there, and she's a patient in the hospital, as an anorexic, and somebody that's bulimic and somebody that's got IVs in. And they give her a script, and then she does all this stuff. And the people that were filming it came up to her after and says, well, are you an actress? It's like, look at the confirmation of what happened in less than 30 years. And yeah, well, I mean, she did all this stuff as a kid, and she kept on doing that stuff. But what's the difference? The difference is that she tried one thing out, it didn't work. She tried another thing out in the group context. she tried out one thing and the group said, no, go away. That doesn't work for you. And how long are you going to keep on trying to do what doesn't work and being upset with it, and your boss is frustrated because you can't do it, but you keep on trying to be self-actualized around something that's not working for you, and this other thing, you have this little glimmer of it, you try it out, and somebody says, wow, that's pretty cool. You have this mutual reciprocity that's going on now that fuels your confidence and your competence, and that's what I would call mutual actualization. It's a group phenomena, and it does work, and it produces high performance in organizations. Does that make sense? And kind of that's how that works. And I mean, stop there for a moment and see if that kind of resonates. You got questions about that? There's a couple, three more that we're going to get through tonight. And you can either sleep and go through and watch the PPT, but I'm going to forge ahead. But stop, time out. How are you with that particular way of looking at motivational theory? Food and water, I don't have it. If I'm the resource giver and I have it, I can move you. You know, glimmer theory and what people are really good at, find your strengths. If I can nurture your capacity and move to that and find that and allow you to do that, and if the people around you accept what you're good at and your contributions to your system, then you see not individual high performance, but collective high performance. And you have to think about that. Here's one for you for those of you that want to play another athletic thing is to read Sacred Hoops. You know, I got a mental block. Who was Michael Jordan's coach on the way to the championships? Yeah, that guy. Okay, thank you. This book is Jackson and Jordan, and it has to do with this movement back and forth between individual high performance, obviously, and at what point did that have to go away a little bit, and there has to be some reciprocity of the movement and the interaction of where the group then moved forward to high performance. But you guys are going to work for groups, or work with them, or control them, or be the bosses of them, or be a player inside of one of them, or be a consultant outside of one of them. And so it's that collective ethos that's going to move you forward to that high performance. And that makes sense to me in terms of knowing about motivational theory, you know, and helping to either know it from the top, know it from the bottom, or know it from across this way. Questions, comments, observations? Is everybody asleep? I'm listening. Back to the screen, John, please. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one because it's on the slide. And once again, those of you that are really intrigued by motivational theory and whether or not you want to use and play in this territory as a play in some other territory, I would offer a real quick look at that for you. Basically, this is the same thing as Maslow's, the earlier slide, the deficiency concepts. That which I don't have, food and water, is on the left. And if I don't have it, I'm dissatisfied. But the problem with this is that many managers think that if I give you the basic paycheck and give you the food and water and give you a good working condition, that life is great and you're going to go out and be a high performer. This is the problem with union negotiations. No. What happens there is that you get the food and water, you get the paycheck, and it stops it. It ceases the tension, and I'm not driven to do anything else beyond that. Why? I got the food and water, it stops the tension. Oh, we're just going to keep the tension out there. I'm not going to give you quite the raise that you wanted. I'm not going to give you quite that exciting assignment. So there's always a little bit left over for me to play with. Well, that's kind of cheesy. I don't like that. But that's one way of looking at it. But essentially, I give you food and water, give you the paycheck. It stops the drive towards performance. But that's a real problem. Now, on the other hand, is that Maslow's territory of what he calls being needs. You get that little glimmer of hope, and once you get it, you're driven to go get more of it. So your satisfaction is driven by the work that you're already doing. You know? That's the premise of that stuff that came out in career management several years ago called "Do What You Love, the Money Will Follow." Yeah, but keep your day job. Don't, the musicians especially out there. We know of one musician that's eating and paying his bill. He doesn't really want a big time apartment. He's just got a little dive that he lives in and he eats, but he actually got a music degree from North Texas State University, and he has the great fortune to live in Austin, Texas, which is, if there's any place that a street musician can make a living, it's going to be in Austin. And he plays in enough pickup bands on weekends that he makes a living. Very few musicians do that. Music educators. So keep your day job, but don't give up your dreams. I can talk a little bit more about that, but let me just do one more. I don't know if I have a chart for that one. Maybe. I just turned Maslow on his side. Did you see what I just did? I'm going to go backwards once and go to that slide. Now watch this slide as I hit the next one. And I want you to think about Maslow's pyramid, which is a vertical pyramid. And we talk about that which you don't have at the bottom and those dreams of what you see at the top. I just threw it on its side and laid it on top of this graph to show you that Maslow and Hertzberg's works the same, kind of. But this next one, this circle in the middle, when you have a paycheck, but you got a boss that doesn't want, hey, my individual in Hermiston where you're talking about where you're stuck in that middle, you're right there. You got a boss that's not willing to play with you to help you move to that place that's exciting for you. Well, he doesn't have to, because you have a basic check and you're stuck in the middle, and that's okay because he just wants you to be stuck in the middle. He doesn't have enough money or energy or time to play with moving you to that place of high performance. But that's an exciting place to play, but it's rare. Again, Peter Vale, some of you gave this back to me from the last time, and we talked about Peter Vale and change, but let me tell you another story about Peter Vale. He's also a high performance guru. He worked with the Dallas Cowboys back in their 2-minute day drill day. Those of you that are football advocates, you'll remember those days when they just scored like crazy for several years with their little 2-minute drill. Not many people have replicated that. And this guy named Peter Vale, he was one of their high performance gurus that helped them get there. He also worked with several of the American yacht teams. And this stuff out here on the far right hand of that comes together when there's these magical conditions where everybody's given each other permission to share in that movement forward. And it's rare stuff, but we're not stuck in the middle. And it's people that are willing to say, okay, I give you a paycheck and you're stuck, and that's okay because I need people that are going to pull the production line. But if I want to really make the difference, we're going to save this company, we're going to move forward, like that guy in St. Mary's. That's a different place. We don't want to be, I think, in the status quo. All right, I'm going to shift gears to another person. Actually, I'd love to bring this lady here. If things go well, I'm going to be able to hear her again, next year at the Western Academy of Management. I shared with you, she's just an amazing person. My entree into her work was when I graded one of her papers when she was a doctoral student, and I was already whatever I was, I don't know. But obviously, she and I are not playing in the same ballparks. I'm in the little school league, and she's way up there. But she's got amazing stuff on this concept of empowerment. I hate that word, okay, because people say, I've empowered you, I've given you the power to be great. And then you go start talking to the employees, and they say, well, they still don't listen, they still don't care. No, I'm not empowered, I'm demoralized. Because first they told me that we were, and now it's even worse, because I had some dreams and hopes, and they took them all away because they don't listen. So Gretchen said, well, how do we know if you've motivated somebody to this point of empowerment? And she said, here's the 4 things. And you can ask yourself this question, if you're the boss, are you giving these 4 things to your people? Or if you're the employee, Are you getting them? Right? One is meaning. And that story that I told a minute ago, or a long time ago this evening, where the typical left-wing liberal student in the social sciences division got the job with health and welfare, well, that's a meaning fit. Their values work together. That's no-brainer stuff. And the typical, capitalist business student that goes to work for a profit-seeking agency or business, that fits. I'm not here judging either one of those, but it works. It's a good place to be. Gretchen says that's the first place. Ask yourself if what you believe in is what the organization believes in. If you're the person on the top, ask yourself if the organizational position that you put, somebody said that mission statements was important criteria for judging an organization. There you go. Am I clear about what I put in front of the world? And do the people that come to work for me, are they clear about that? Secondly, competence is important, which means that we get to another level of skills fit. Now, they all start kind of getting together. Here's a way of kind of looking at that. Look at the companies that you are looking at or that you work for and ask yourself about their tuition reimbursement program and how that kind of plays out. Or their purchase of people as raw material, right? Can you track what I'm saying? Two things. As a company, do I buy a finished product and put them into a job that I hold them accountable for? Or, as a company, do I buy raw material and put them into a job that they're not ready for? Well, one would be, I have this skills fit. I buy you ready-made, and I give you a job, and I hold you accountable for producing results that you can give me. Is that logical? Okay? And the other one, the tuition reimbursement thing, maybe, maybe not. I buy you as raw material, and I put you in that job, and I'm holding you accountable for results that you can't give me. And I'm not giving you money to take classes, and I'm not letting you train with that department head over there that could give you that skill in a cross-job training program, but I'm still holding you accountable, and I'm going to fire you later because you didn't have it. But I'm telling the world that I have an empowered workforce. Not. Does that make sense to you? I either have to buy you as a finished product and let you do what you're capable of, or I buy you as raw material and give you some money to train or give you some OJT, and then I can let you go look at the company called Geldwin. They make doors and windows. They have a training program that's an 18-month training program for their management executive training deal, and they cross-train you in every position in the company, and they find out what you're good at, and that's what they assign you to after the 18 months. That's what I would call skill fit. They find out what you're good at and where your best contribution to the company is, and they've invested 18 months of dollars in your salary to do that. That's pretty cool. And they're putting money behind this concept of finding the best person for the right job, and not every company will do that. They let you just hang out to dry. Or some variation on the theme, some companies will give you tuition reimbursement for an entire undergraduate degree, which I think is incredible. And our own agencies that grade business degrees tell of us that half of your degree needs to be liberal arts, because the understanding of the world and human existence is important. We can tell you about the 14 financial ratios, but if you don't understand how all that plays together, because we're human beings in a big system, you lost it. But I'm not going to give you money for an undergraduate degree. I'm going to give you money for that accounting class and for that data processing class. That's where it stops. Do you see the difference? How far am I going to get you to a place of meaning and a place of competence? And that skills fit is incredibly important. The next one is the most difficult, self-determination and autonomy. Do we have the freedom? And every time I travel overseas and come back from other kinds of social, political, and business-oriented systems, either not or not, yes or not, and come back to America, I think, we really do have a lot more freedom, no matter how much we say, no, I better keep my day job. don't give it up and become that free agent. But, you know, you look around us and we have a lot more freedom, you know, to make those choices, to go or not go. Now, I know it's an incredibly chaotic and turbulent time in our economy right now, so be very careful about just walking away from a job that you already have. But think about that. But underneath that, you think about somebody that's truly, truly going to give you the best work. They're saying, I like it here. I am free to be a free agent and give you. Once upon a time, I was accused of sort of giving in to the man at Lewis Clark State College because I was doing everything that they were asking me to do. And they said, no, you're not free. You're doing what they say. But I said, yeah, but they want me to teach at night, and I love those night students. And they want me to travel to Coeur d'Alene, and I love the weekend classes. And they're going to give me essentially a week's vacation time to take my family to McCall during Christmas break and ski during the day and teach at night. What would I not like about that, you know? But they say, no, but they're exploiting your willingness to teach. But look at where that fits with who I am and what the institution needs. You know, the institution had placed itself either because somebody dreamed of it so, our leaders at the top that were looking at the demographics of what our market was and saying, those people need education. Go after them. Or was it a competitor-driven market where the three other schools in Idaho said, the state's not big enough for all of us, and we said, no, that's a competitive market. We can own that better than you do. And we convinced the legislatures to change the words that said, Lewis Clark State College shall be the delivery of alternative education. I don't care where it came from, but the fact that up there at the top, there was a mission, and that mission was close to my heart. So when you look at that, my operational instructions to behave were very consistent with the freedom that I wanted to do what I believed in, but it was very connected with this first one, the values fit, and what I also had the skills to do with the teaching degree, and also having my teaching degree was from North Texas State University in the heyday of anarchism and radical experimental education classes. I had radical education teachers that said, no, behave this way. Do it this way. And it's fueled the way that I behave in the classroom. I was all about teaching at night and weekends and online and all that stuff. And look at how I'm empowered. It's a wonderful thing, not a bad thing. And then ask yourself at the end of the day, or ask yourself as the boss, if your employees can ask this question and do it. At the end of the day, can they walk home and say, yeah, today I made a difference. Today I made a difference. So after last night, after having a couple of days of demoralizing things, and this quarter I'm feeling more stoked than I've felt in a long time. Last night this individual that I was talking about, one of my alumni, he was one of my students, one of my advisees, and he's now a teacher. And you think, how much more can you pay it forward than have one of your students be an elementary school teacher? You know, sharing with the world what he got out of your classes or the rest of the education. Come to find out his son, who is not quite through college, may well end up coming to be a student at EOU. And I'm thinking, oh my gosh. So at the end of last night, I couldn't even sleep because it said, look at just one little thing. I'll be fueled for the next 3 months, over one phone conversation. And when a student walks out of my office and says, thanks for the degree plan, thanks for the work, and I know most of us will always have some disagreements with the way that things are going, but every once in a while when somebody's, like last week when I read Peter Vale's words back at the papers that I was reading from y'all, I was thinking, all right, it's cool, I'm happy. Something that I thought was important, obviously you thought was important, or somebody did, and I said, you know what, today, just this moment in time, I made a difference. So I was feeling empowered, and that's great. It makes me feel good about my bosses and about the whole totality of the way that we're engaged in this. Now ask yourself, as an employer, as a potential boss, do you have the thoughts and sort of the wherewithal inside of you to orchestrate the conditions at work to where there is a way for me to collect the big beliefs, there is a way for me to allow us to unfold in terms of having the skills necessary to do with what I'm capable of doing. I give people freedom to play or not, and their jobs are such that every once in a while they feel that what they did connected, and made a difference. And that's Gretchen Spreitzer's work. And she's got a book out also. I don't have oh man, I got to add that to my list of things to do. It's not on the bib yet, but Gretchen's newest book. It's about how she did this in companies. So that's the concept of empowerment. Comments, questions, observations. We just keep on running around. I'm just throwing tons of stuff at you. The undergraduates are used to it. I did over and over and over again. But these ought to be getting pretty close to stories that you know about at this point. Let me go backwards and throw another story that kind of links them all up and down. And I didn't do this. It wasn't me. And I don't know where these words came from. But they worked. I think somebody gave them to me or we brainstormed them together. But it was sort of a mission statement of one of the groups that I was the boss of. I don't want to say that I was the leader. I was the boss, the manager. It was when I was an officer I was the scout platoon leader for the 49th Mechanized Infantry Battalion. And we had a mission statement that said, we're the eyes and the ears of the battalion. And it drove everything we did. All the way to the schools that we got people to go to, the training that we allowed, the skills that we did. We had to have special technology for the infrared stuff, and we had listening devices. And it drove the values of the people that were behaving in my unit. It drove what we were trying to get people accommodated to do in terms of skills. And people either liked it or didn't like it. And in the military, there truly is some personality testing kind of stuff that goes on when they start placing people in various kinds of roles, combat soldiers versus others. And in our job, we didn't want those testosterone-laden young men who are going to go out and blow the world up. We wanted people that were going to sit back in and sort of listen a while and come back and talk about it, And that's a different kind of a personality. So the freedom that they portrayed had to do with the totality of we're the eyes and the ears of the battalion. And could they do it well? Well, in the beginning, they couldn't. Because when I first assessed, the membership, which was another technique that I was taught how to do, and I don't know if I just picked this up in the management theory of our officer candidate classes, intellectual classes versus our behavioral classes, where we're out there pushing people around and making plans and saying, I didn't coordinate the helicopter today or that kind of thing. Maybe it's in our skull sessions. But somebody once upon a time said, when you first take over a unit, you better learn who they are. So I took the time to go to the personnel offices and pick up all their files. And what I discovered is that not one single one of them had been to infrared school. And in that day, that was pretty, today you go buy, anybody can go buy night scopes and all that kind of stuff. And, it's kind of open technology. But back in those days, it wasn't. Furthermore, we didn't have any machines that would do it. Those of you that are in the military would realize the whole pecking order between, active duty troops and National Guard and Reserve troops, and we got nothing. And for whatever reason, I was able to interact, I think probably because of that Vietnam vet stuff that was going on, and I was one of few officers in that group that actually had seen combat, and my bosses, a couple of layers up, not the ones right above me, they kind of got irritated at me a lot, because here's this, quote, second lieutenant, and if you know about military structure, that's not very high up. But I was a second lieutenant that was talking to the colonels, because we'd been in Vietnam, not necessarily together. But as a result of all of that, and the beauty of how all of this fits together, that thing called we're the eyes and the ears of the battalion, I was able to say, look at where we are not. We don't have any equipment. And I have nobody that's been to school. And I was able to get them to get reallocated equipment from Fort Hood for us. And I was able to get a couple, I don't remember, that's too many years ago, but I was able to get a couple of people actually reassigned to active duty. And that's a money decision. You know, the reserves were saying there's no money to send people to training. And I'm saying, but sir, we can't do. And when I left in 1980, several years later, that unit was one of the first ones out in Desert Storm. And I'm thinking, thank God that we went from not to yes, because the totality of Gretchen Spreitzer, now you think, empowered military, you bet. It's all the same. You've got complicated sets of events and people and resources being coordinated to produce effective goods and services. Same thing here. And Spreitzer is saying as a motivational process, that is potent. But the totality of it is important. So that's Spreitzer's work. Infancy to maturity scales. Okay. Back to the screens. Did everybody see that? That's got a kind of an awkward background. I'm not so sure that it's real clear. Can you read that stuff? Up in the upper left-hand corner, it says value of the reward. Can I get you close enough there? This is the process stuff. So I'm going to tell you the story of, a true story, of two salesmen for Mutual of New York. Anybody know about the insurance industry? I think I may have talked a little bit about that our first week. Did I or not? Insurance is kind of an awkward industry. It's different. I can't do it. I mean, those are people that they love it. They're so passionate about what they do and the ability that they have to deliver a check to somebody whose family member died or something like that. And, it's cool. But they also know it's a science. And, you and I would get depressed after the fourth time that we're on the phone and they say, no, 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 no. And they're going to get on the phone 6 more times and make 6 more calls. And maybe it may be that even at the end of day 1 at 10 calls and at day 2, they've got all no's. But they also know that somebody has studied, it's like I said about selling those Bibles, in deliverance country. Somebody studied how to do this. And if you're willing to trust the technology, it works. They know this. So the story that I'm going to tell you, obviously, is somebody making a decision to continue to behave in a way that gets them a bigger reward. And it literally, the true story is the number 1 and the number 2 salespeople for the Mutual of New York thing. Now, this was many years ago when if somebody's making $250,000 take-home pay today, that's a ton of money, isn't it? I mean, that's a ton of money to me, I know. But this is what these folks were making back when this story was told. So, step 1, value of the reward. Who's not going to value that? I mean, it's going to take some unusual person in America not to value a $250,000 take-home pay. So step 1, the answer is yes, I keep on going. It's the process of determining whether or not moving somebody to the next step of behaving works. I value the reward, it's okay. So the next thing, I'm moving across the line, and you should see a movement to the inside of the circle that says effort. And then at the bottom, you say perceived effort and reward probability. Okay, so the bottom left-hand corner, perceived effort and reward probability. Lost me again. I'm just aggressive with my microphone here. Thank you, John. Perceived effort, reward probability. You with me? What's that mean? Well, these two guys, $250 million at the end of a year. I make 10 calls a day, or 9 or 11. It's not a problem. I perceive that if I keep on doing that, well, Jim is making 10. I'm just simply going to make 2 more calls a day. I'll stay here till 5:30 instead of 5. Not a problem. The answer is yes. I'll keep on doing it. What's the likelihood that if I make 12 instead of 10, that I'm going to get 275 and get to be number one? Highly likely. Scientifically, I know this will happen. Does that make sense to you? Back in my martial arts days, you know, when I was, you know, I don't know if you know the martial arts, what they call the circuit competition, not the stuff that's out there today with the rage and the cage stuff, but in the circuit competitions in my day, there was basically two layers of things that were happening at the tournaments. One was the gymnastics, what they called the kata or the forms, and the other one was the fighting. I was average in the fighting, and in that gymnastics kind of kata stuff, I have in my heyday, I was the number 9 ranked competitor in the Northwest. You know, so I knew that the perceived effort was if I kept on working out the way that I did, and went to a tournament and paid some money there, that the probability of me taking another first place or a second place or maybe winning grand championship is pretty high. So why wouldn't I want to do it? I love this stuff. So the answer is yes. I'll keep doing it, right? So now then we get to the end line and it says effort. These two guys play the effort. The guy that was number 2, make 12 calls, you bet, every day for the year. Now then we look at the next one. Can you read the word abilities and traits and then perceptions of the roles? Well, what is my perceptions? Well, you know, I'm a little bit different than everybody else. And yeah, I miss supper sometimes because I'm making a sales call and I work late at night. But you know, every Thursday I take my kid to soccer practice. And I go to his games on Friday afternoon. Or her games, as the case may be. And I love that stuff. And every year we take the family to the Bahamas, you know, because I get a reward. I love doing what I'm doing. And guess what? I have the ability to do it. What do you know about yourself? Jenny playing soccer versus Jenny doing art, you know, that's different. See, she would eventually get to the point to where she tried the physical thing and it didn't work and say, stop the behavior, no more choice to keep on trying doing what doesn't work. But the art thing, yes. This guy making 250 versus making 275, yeah, got it, keep doing it. So the next one, you see the performance accomplishments. He did it. At the end of the year, made 12 calls a day, and his remuneration, reward, check was bigger than the other guy. He's now number 1. You with me so far? Okay? But we're not finished yet with where it either works or doesn't work. You think if it stops there, this guy is going to do that forevermore, and everybody's going to be happy. But then we have to look at far right-hand side. It says satisfaction. But I got some major things to get through there. And I'm going to back up to where it says extrinsic and intrinsic reward. Can you see that part? Okay? Extrinsic reward is that paycheck. I mean, it's not the paycheck, although... Now, let me throw another one out for you. Anybody ever met any gamblers? I mean, professional gamblers? Or you hear about them and watch them on the Texas Hold'em championships and all that kind of stuff? You know, now those people are intrinsically motivated by the look and the feel and the smell of money as it's going across that table. They are intrinsically just stoked by playing with money and winning. I had a student at Worcester State College that actually made his living playing cards. The guy was making $30,000 a year at 24, you know, gambling. I'm thinking, yo, that's crazy. I couldn't do it, but he was intrinsically motivated. To the rest of us, it's not the paycheck that's keeping you doing what you're doing. And in order for you to be content in a longitudinal way, you will not sustain and keep your behavior going unless there is that I love this thing. You've got to have the extrinsic reward. You have to have the paycheck. Back in when I look at the karate stuff, let me give you the two differences for me, the kata or the forms. I loved it. I also love to go get the heck beat out of me, get your jaw broken. It's like, why do you keep doing this, you idiot? I just like to play out there. I don't know. It was fun. But in the other part, I was winning trophies every time that I walked into the door. All that I had to do was go to the gym and I get a trophy, right? In the fighting, I'd win the first 2 or 3, and then those other folks that had the head and the heart would just trash me, you know. I got not one extrinsic reward. I never got trophies until this one magical tournament where I beat one of the guys that was one of the, he was a full contact guy, and it's a whole nother story, but I won a first place in fighting that day, but it was after 13 years of fighting in tournaments as a black belt. Why the heck would I do that? It's absolutely stupid. I was driven by intrinsic joy of just going and playing with these folks, right? But I never got the trophy. In the other one, I got the trophy, which was the dollar, the reward, and the intrinsic satisfaction of doing something that I really enjoyed doing. Now, let's go back to the Mutual of New York guys, right? They obviously love to do what they do, so they're intrinsically satisfied on a daily basis. And they obviously have a paycheck that none of us will ever see. So they were extrinsically satisfied and intrinsically satisfied, but we still haven't got to the point to where they're going to keep doing it. And I have to know that. If I'm a manager, if I'm a corporate administrator that wants to help predict the forward movement of all the people, I want to know how I can motivate people to keep on making the decision to perform for me. And here's that other piece. The one at the top on the right hand that says perceived equitable rewards. Okay? And you can look in your books under equity theory. Basically it says this. And don't worry about the little circles and squares and and the X's and pluses and 3 of these and 4 of those matched what that means. The valence will move this way. Just think about this. I look at what I do and look at what you give me for that, and I'll look at what they do and what you give them for that, and I'll compare it. And if it doesn't make sense to me, I quit. This is the problem with equal pay for equal work and what the women are going through, because it's not about getting the same dollar, but it certainly is about fair play, right? And if I work 10 hours and get $8, and you work 10 hours and you get $12, I'm thinking, wait a minute. True story about a law firm back east and a woman who was a rainmaker. She wanted to be partner, and she was producing more income in the billable hours that she was putting out. And you say, well, how does that work? It had to do with referrals and stuff, right? So as a rainmaker, people loved her. She brought clientele into the firm, but then she also brought referrals that she couldn't have the time to do, but she fed the other partners money. She was driving income up, right? And she wanted to go the baby track and say, I'm going to quit working 60 hours a week. I'm going to work 40, and I'll still give you the same money, so give me partnership. And they said, I'm sorry, but that's not the way that it works. You're in this law firm, and it works like this, so no, you can't have partner. And she said, that's just not right. I can work 40 and bring more money into the company than those yahoos do that don't, So what is fair? Let me get the payback of what I'm contributing. Does that make sense? You'll do that. At the end of the year, they go to the annual awards banquet, and they're spending tons of money to take all their top 30 or 40 people from all over. Now, this is a lot of money. Do you know, if you think about billable hours for an accounting firm and a law firm, if you bring in $100 to the firm, or let's say you bring $500 to the firm and you get 100 of it, look at the difference. It's even bigger than that, quantumly bigger than that in insurance firms, where what you make personally is just this much as opposed to the money that you are putting into the coffers of the headquarters. So if I just put $250,000 in my pocket, think about the money that's going to Mutual of New York. Tons and tons of dollars. You with me? Now, we spend some money to bring 30 or 40 people to headquarters, and we give you this annual awards banquet, and we give you this little trophy. It's not just a trophy. As I recall the story, and you can probably go back in and Google case studies and stuff, 5 years in a row, Mutual of New York, when they announced the old number 1 player, rolled over in a double door and drove out a Cadillac. Number 2 guy becomes number 1 at the annual awards banquet. You're number one now. They open up the double doors and drive out a Volkswagen van. Now, what do you think just happened? Now, I want to offer you a caveat to that. Maybe the guy was an avid outdoorsman and they had tricked it out to be a camper van. But that's not what happened. If it would have been, the cost of the tricked out camper van might have been comparable to the Cadillac. But it was just simply a Cadillac versus a Volkswagen van. $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 difference. We're talking about nickels and dimes to a company that big. But look at what it just did. I'm going to tell you real quick what the backlash of that was, and you can extrapolate on out. Number one, both of these guys could have retired and quit forever because of what they call residual incomes, on insurances. They make big money in the first few years of an insurance policy, and every year for the life of ever, they keep on making money a little bit. They could retire today, both of them. And they chose to keep working. And how much money are they making being number one at 250 net income? And how many people are watching this happen? All of the people that are producing this much wealth for that company, and every one of them watched that, and most of them knew what had happened for 5 years. How many of them dropped their rankings in the sales production of that organization from 1 down to 10, down to 15? And how much money did that company just lose? Now that's the raging capitalist in me, that says, whoa, that was stupid. Absolutely stupid. But in terms of morale and passion and excitement to keep on doing that, this whole thing just fell apart. Now, in minor ways, that happens all over. It's not a 30 or 40,000. It may just have simply been an employee banquet at the end of the season, a couple $1,000 that they say, we're not doing that anymore. And all of a sudden, yeah, this is not fair. Life's not good. I quit. Or I quit. I go to work late. I do this sort of passive resistance to high performance. And maybe it works and maybe it doesn't, but that's not the dreams that we want for our organizations. Is it? I don't know. You think about it. Comments, questions, observations. Where are you at? I mean, that's just a few of them, obviously in terms of organizational theory and organizational behavior and psychology, there's just tons of ways and tons of complicated ways to look at it. But those are a few of the ones that I think are fairly critical. And you need to kind of know about that, as you look at dealing with the management part of running an organization. It's soft territory, it's complicated territory, but it does help to be aware of it, so. You awake out there?
I got something.
Yeah.
I work for
Come off this, John, I'm going to go back.
companies that have, the year-end party or whatever. And the other side to it is, when they're doing layoffs or whatever, the expectation of having it, but if you're having layoffs and stuff, how can you spring for that when you're getting rid of people?
Yeah,
And
you got to
management
deal.
struggles with that. I know,
And they do that. And I don't know that this is everything that you're thinking, but one of the things that's in my mind as you talk about that, remember earlier this evening I talked about the Blue Cross Blue Shield regions that went through this organizational restructure? We did some sort of really informal surveys of employees inside and outside the organization that this was happening to, and because they were doing some downsizing along with that. And insurance companies tend to reward people with parties and that kind of stuff, and it really was happening. And there was so much turbulence all around. The people that got laid off were obviously upset, and the people inside that were still there immediately preceding and during the event were going through exactly what you're going. It's like totally turbulent and chaotic. Oh, what are we going to do? 6 months later, it was an entirely different story. And the resurveying of who's doing what, who's happy, who's not happy, are we effective in our performance, all the scores went up. Why? Because I got salvaged. I'm still here, and it was an entirely different thing. But around the event itself is like major turbulence, major dissatisfaction. And you think, well, is that the way that it always is? Are we always going to need to have that kind of turbulence before we get to resolution? That's maybe, but I'm not so sure I want to say I'm going to intentionally throw you into chaos so that we can get to a better place later. Yes?
Well, this is just kind of a side note, but when people are being laid off all around you and everybody's kind of on edge, like not knowing whether or not they're going to be next, usually I would think the last thing they want to do is go to a company party, but I bet they feel obligated to show that they want to be a part of the company and want to do those activities. So is
Still
it
loyal.
really for the benefit of the workers, or are they like, well, I better get my butt there, or I could
Yeah.
go next because I don't care about
You
the
have to
company.
keep that sort of group loyalty thing kind of
Right.
going on. Yeah.
Just a side note.
Yeah, no, but it's a good one. You know, the other thing there is sort of the differences of whether or not the demoralization is going to create, oh, I'm not confident, I'm not going to produce, or is it going to create just enough of that anxiety that says, oh man, I don't want to be the next one, I'm doing a good job today. So you get what they would call a bifurcated performance line. You get some that are not doing well, but you get others that are really out there on the edges again because they don't want to be the ones that go. You know, so it's very convoluted what's going on during that point of change.
It is complicated because you're trying to manage expectations. There's some who wouldn't expect you to have the party because you just had to get rid of people. And others, if you don't have it, we must be doing really bad. Better
Yeah.
put my resume out and start looking because
See what's going on out there. You know. Other observations, Hermas and Clackamas, are you guys still there? Are we still somewhere interacting here? See a couple of heads, that's good. At least there's one that says somebody's still kind of finagling around here, dancing around that territory. Okay, what's next? Remember, you got, I will get to you some grades on that pre-thing, but don't worry too much. Most of them, well, all of them are 90s and 93s. If that's not comfortable for you and you want to shift around with that and argue with me or talk, feel free to holler at me. We can do that. You want to change what you're doing. What I would recommend if you're thinking about right now changing, you know, is that I would do it within a week so that you've got the quarter to think about it, right? If not, play with what you've got. But if you want to change, do so quickly. And then also think about the raging conversation of tonight. Think about the assigned reading. And if you didn't take the 2 self-assessments, take them and read the self-assessment, you know, comments at the back and what that may mean. Okay? And those of you that are willing to sort of think about your prior careers or what classes you've had, especially for all of those of you that are variations on a business major kind of a thing, anything that you can bring to this class from what you've had at the undergraduate level is certainly value added.